No, Silas and Regan there were just talking about basically culture creation and how you manufacture a culture, and I think the two lads were kind of making the point that many cultures are probably not even that old. Like they're talking about Israel being maybe the Israeli culture, for example, being a couple of even 100 years old. What I just said, it just resonated with me about Ireland and the Irish in inverted commas and all that came with it. Like that, it's just a construct, and there's parts of it like that. I still don't understand, and there's bits of it that I'm starting to kind of understand. So one part of it is obviously language. So language being a huge part of culture. Obviously, with the Israelis, it's Hebrew, which is kind of has an Arabic, as I understand it, it has some sort of an Arabic root to that language. But anyway, Silas and probably tell you more about that. But the Irish, the Gaelic language, the native tongue, as it were, here in Ireland, the mother tongue. Um, Basically, the Irish stopped speaking Gaelic like a few hundred years ago. So, say my grandmother, for example, her around her time back spoke Gaelic, and for reasons that were never fully sort of explained to us in school or otherwise, or even amongst our family members or whatever, the Gaelic language kind of died out. It died a mysterious death, and English became basically the mother tongue. Like we were all brought up speaking English. Now Irish is still taught in schools, but it feels like it's like as if I had to learn German or French or something. It's a foreign, like it's not. We're not speaking it on a day-to-day basis, even though we've inherited a lot of the kind of linguistic patterns and whatnot, and even words, etc. But anyway, it's just to jump on the point that and like then you're wondering, well, how did it die out, and why did it die out? And it just didn't make sense to me that people would just randomly decide to abandon their language. The people would wake up over a generation or two and go, you know what? I don't want to speak the Gaelic anymore. I want to speak the Queen's English because that's the language of the empire, and it's more, it's beneficial for us for work. I don't know, for whatever reason. So it just seems a bit random. Like as if America, for example, in the morning, if American people all decided to start speaking, I don't know, Spanish or something, or Chinese or whatever, or the Scottish people decided to speak, I don't know, Swedish. Like it was a bit random. So I think it was enforced and promoted by the power structure down through the education system and the powers that be, that they were essentially
Mm.
modifying the culture, creating a new culture, and they were sort of trying to sever the connections with the past. Because I know, like for example, language is important because within a culture, within a people, the mind of those people understands the world around them through language. Like language plays a huge part of it. So the actual, if you can remove that language, you can kind of sever their own connection with the past, and basically sort in a way destroy their identity or even their self identity. And because they don't have that linguistic framework that they inherited from their ancestors, that has a lineage gone back along that's been a long time to establish. So when you suddenly sever it, you can kind of basically you're at a point, you're at a carte blanche to recreate, renew, rebuild that those people with a new culture.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know here the Scots Gaelic was effectively outlawed. I mean, if you spoke it as a child in the schools, not that it was
Yeah,
really spoken down here much. We were more uh, inclined to speak Scots, which is actually probably closer to Middle English, or even some of the earlier or ancient forms of medieval English than perhaps modern English is. But you were beaten as a child if you spoke uh,
yeah,
Gaelic. Even as
yeah,
well, if we use Scots slang in English classes, that was always pointed out to us. I remember one of the lads in one of the English classes. He was a bit of a troublemaker. Um, anyway, he said something in Scots. I forget what it was now. And by that, I mean the not the Scots language, but the sort of localized dialect that we have. And you know, the teacher basically corrected him, and you know, he basically, I won't repeat it here, but basically told her to, you know, go do one, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, he was sent out. But it just shows you there. I mean, we are being instructed to speak a certain way. Um, so it's really to culturally acclimatize you fundamentally to London in the
Yeah.
British context. Britain as well. Britain as an idea doesn't exist. It's a fictitious nationality, and
Mm.
you know, even though I strongly believe, yeah, economically Scotland probably, I believe, from what I've looked at the metrics, probably wouldn't last on its own. That's due to a multitude of factors. One being the idea that the entire economy of Scotland, a quarter of the workforce is employed by the government. So, and in the government as well, a lot of the local councils are heavily in debt as well. Um, so all of those things, but Britain as an idea itself was a fiction. It was created, totally
Yeah.
created. First by John Dee, and it was eventually
Mm.
crystallized to establish the British Empire. But the English language itself, the English language isn't actually the language of the English people. I know that might
Yeah.
sound absolutely insane, but English as we know it today is not the same as English of even of the middle ages of the medieval era, even of the 1600s. And you notice English has been turned into a sort of tabula rasa language, not just a sort of lingua franca of the world, but it's been turned into a blank canvas in which we're seeing a devolution of it, a prepared, curated devolution of the language, of the vocabulary, of the vernacular. So people
Yeah.
can't properly express themselves. This is what it's about. And this is, by the way, that's why Hebrew was revived as well.
Yeah.
Hebrew was revived because fundamentally, the only way to bind this, what was a multi ethnic, even though they were all Jews, they were multi ethnic, a multi ethnic state, was to effectively establish their new language. Because it's like you're saying, once you sever the language, you basically sever your connection to your history, you sever your connection to your own cultural creation, you sever your connection to your very heart, because the language is the cord of your soul, right? Um, I mean,
Yeah.
what's crazy is, of course, I'm Scottish, you're Irish.
Mm.
I'm sort of mixed. I've got English and a bit of Irish descent, and I'm sure you've probably got more Irish descendants than I do, at least in close proximity. Um, but I've never dreamt in anything but English. You've probably never dreamt in anything but English. You know,
Mm.
you've never we've never thought in we've never
Yeah.
conjured a thought in our own native language. You know,
Yeah.
um, which is peculiar. It's peculiar to think of that, and it's peculiar sort of to glance at the thought that perhaps we are Englishmen in all but name. We've just got funny
Yeah.
accents, you know, and
Yeah.
the only residue we have left is is our accents. But do you know what's interesting as well? Just lastly on this final
Yeah.
point, there's I usually don't I don't there's a guy we work with. I mean, he is an extreme Scottish nationalist, right? I mean, extreme. He doesn't believe anyone should be in Scotland unless you're of Scottish descent and you can trace your family back here to 1945 or what have you, right? Anyway, he mentioned about the quote unquote white settlers, right? And he mentioned this years ago, and it's the idea that the English are coming up, right? And they're effectively colonizing the Highlands. So if you go into the Highlands now, there's a lot of these rural areas, these old crofton villages that were once, bustling and teeming with the Highland culture. They're now basically barren and desolate. They've been financially made destitute as well by London and of course the terrible policies of the English, or rather British Parliament, and they're getting all. You go up there now, all you're hearing effectively is English, these sort of Southern English accents. You go to Edinburgh, a lot of you hear a hell of a lot of Southern English because again, the local people are being priced out of the areas. You know, it starts with the city centre, then works its way out as inflation increases. It's gentrification, and we're effectively now being disenfranchised fully. It's not just our language that's going; it's the accent itself. So you're losing all flavour
Yeah.
of your culture, and couple that with the sort of ethnic displacement as well. That effectively what they're doing is they're creating all of these countries, our countries, our nations, our lands. They're being
Yeah.
turned into plantations, grey plantations.
Yeah.
For the baron.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like, and it's just I find it interesting and just kind of to imagine how an entire people can abandon their language. Like how like I get that it was, I guess it was like kind of like the native what happened with the Native Americans or something, like, that basically you had a situation where you were living under the kind of the boot, as it were, of colonialism. And I'd say a lot of people were in dire poverty, to be blunt about it. Like in Ireland, especially, Ireland was poor, like poor. You know what I mean? There was, and like people had zero education. There was no, I don't think there was any there wasn't an education system before a certain point here. And like if you went back historically, it was the land of saints and scholars. But like probably most of the scholars came in through the monasteries. So within the monks that were in the monasteries traditionally in Ireland, like I mean, going back to the 13th century and back beforehand, like they were educated because they had access to the libraries. But like I'd say, the general population was just in extreme servitude and endemic warfare, and was just kind of trying to exist in a kind of in farming, basically small farming, smallholder farms. So like they hadn't they just didn't have an education system. So then when modernity came in, as you say, Silas, part of their identity, their language was forbidden. Like there was laws against it or whatever. And then they would maybe perhaps would have seen that offered them, the English language offered them sort of modernity as well, so they began to slowly migrate, I think, and were forced as well. But it's strange to see that it sort of dies out. And I mean, people still speak it in Ireland, and we have TV channels, for example, that are all in the Gaelic language, etc. But it kind of took on a different format then. It was less sort of organic, and it became more like, a little bit, it had a kind of an exclusive thing going on, that if you were speaking it, it was kind of like your average Joe sort of wasn't speaking it, but people who were
Mhm.
from the middle class, dare I say it, upper middle class, who could afford the education and were, maybe from some of the remaining Gaelic
Mhm.
speaking areas, or were, of a certain education, or were a certain social bent, were kind of speaking it, like, But anyway, the wider point being that you can totally influence people. You can completely and utterly influence who they think they are, where they think they're from, what they think they belong to in terms of society, their nation, God knows, their gender, their sanity, their consciousness. Every aspect of it can be completely and utterly tailored. And if you're clever about it, as the current power structure evidently are clever about it, you can do it in such a way as they won't even know it's happening to them. It'll all be done in a kind of a subconscious, gently guiding type of way, and they'll be maneuvered along a certain path. So it's something that all of us sort of need to be sort of cognizant of, and maybe it boils down to what values, what core pillars, dare I use that term, holds you up? What's propping you up inside? What's the, if you boil away all the fat and the steam, what's left? Who are you, like the you of yous, the inner self? Who is that person that cannot be altered, that can't be changed, that can't be chipped away at? So, and that's assuming there's some remnant, there's some aspect of us that is absolutely unique. And selfhood, that type of selfhood. And I mean, it's great to think, maybe there is such a thing as a selfhood, a complete and utter inner me that's, that's a unique thing. But like, if I'm not aware of it, if I myself am in touch with it, and if I myself aren't aware of its borders, then how could I defend it? And how could I stop someone from trying to manipulate it or change it or morph it into something else? So it's like maybe there's a wider point then in where we are in this trajectory of change, that this awareness of selfhood is very important. Like,
Well, absolutely. And
yeah.
another point to mention as well is that we gave up our languages, but we also gave up our folk religions, our religions,
Mm,
and we gave it up to Christianity, And
yeah.
I, you effectively at that point you actually lost your temporal anchors for the cultivation of not just the selfhood, but the identity, and the sort of fire that was within the community itself. We lost the druids, for example,
Yes. Yes.
in Britain, and of course in northwestern, well, really most of Western and Central Europe. And what happened was when you lost them, it's akin to if the Jews lost their rabbis or the Hindus lost the Brahmin. That's it.
Yeah.
It's over. They are the storytellers. They are the ones who were the sort of regulators, the barometers of the culture, or at least of the sort of connection between the culture of the sort of working and middle classes and that of the upper classes or academia, the intelligentsia.
You know.
So they act as the bridge between the two. And we were, well, for example, in our own case, I mean, this is all the way back up supposedly to the 5th century that Scotland was placed under the boot of the church, and I believe it was the 6th or 7th century with Saint Patrick that
Yeah.
that occurred. So, and then it was later on with England after, of course, the Germanic pagans or
Yeah.
heathens were incorporated into the church. So that, I mean, yeah, one important question is what makes a people just give up their language? But another even more fundamental question is what makes a people give up the gods of their ancestors?
Yeah.
What makes them drive them to worship a foreign individual on being crucified to death? You know, I mean,
Well,
jump in,
I
man.
think I think the answer to that question is, as the Mexican cartels say, silver or lead.
Yes.
Your decision. Lead meaning a bullet. So we'll give you a bullet between the two eyes, or if you want the other choice, we'll pay you. We'll give you the silver. We'll buy you out. So I think that's essentially what happened with these cultures. They were either basically destroyed or bribed
But
into the modernity. And I
absolutely.
think
But
that's what happened. And it's funny. I'll tell you a
mm,
quick one, right? This is a bit of an interpretation of some something I've seen in the landscape here in County Clare. I was up walking in the Burren, which is like a very interesting area, kind of a karst limestone area in. It's like a desert, really, a hilly limestone desert. That's the product of glacial erosion, and it goes back to like it's millions of years. Silas, I brought you for a walk up there at one point,
yeah.
and so I walked up to a different place where I hadn't been before, and near Cairn, actually, a small village in the Burn. And up on the top of these two hills, I found these two cairns, Cairn. And a cairn, for anyone who doesn't know, is basically it's kind of a burial mound, as much as we know about them. It's where, the older ancient people may have buried their dead, or, as I understand it anyway, they had some sort of a ritual significance. So if you were looking from the distance, you'd see the top of the hill, then you'd see this blip, like almost like, dare I say it, a nipple on top of the hill, and that's the cairn. And I walked up to where they were, and I observed there were very, very big cairns. They were bigger than anyone I'd ever seen. Like, they were, the size of maybe three average family living rooms in a modern semi-detached house, like quite big, and large, but made of large boulders, like that would have taken maybe, a couple of men to lift. There were, anyway, what I noticed was at the foot of the hill, as I was walking, I saw a ruin of an old church. When I say old, I'm talking at a guess 12th century. And I was on top of the hill, and I said, I'm going to walk down there, even though it was going to take me a lot of time extra on my hike. I said, I'll shinny down along. So it took me about another hour to get from where the cairn was down to where I thought this little ruin of a church was. Now, when I say church, the church had no roof on it. It was just the gables and a stone structure that was, again, maybe the average size, two or three, like, family living rooms in a semi-detached house, maybe, like, like 5 meters wide by approx maybe 15 meters long at the max, 10 meters long, 10 to 15 meters odd. Smallish, smallish. But as I got down there, I noticed there wasn't one church down there, but there was three. There were three separate little churches, and they were very, very small. The smallest one was like really small, like this, the size of, like, a small, just a really small room in a house. They were very basic, very primitive, but they'd been made with the local stone. And the point I want to make, I wondered to myself, and I wondered, why were there three? Why did they make three of these churches instead of one? And they were all in the same little patch of ground, the same little area, a little fertile, but there was fertile green fields surrounded by this uh, barren desert rock. And what I think they did was, the early proselytizers, the early Christians, when they came into Ireland, into this part of Ireland, this would have been a Druidic sort of stronghold, one of the last outposts perhaps of the old religion. And they were trying to basically convert people who were in the pagan way of life, or the Druidic way of life, who were, we'll say, the people of the cairns. They were trying to get the people, the tribes of those cairns up on the hilltop, into Christianity. So what I think they did was, the 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 pagan religion, the Druidic religion, had a tripartite or a tridentine, or it was focused in around the number three. So there was at the top of that religion, I'm guessing, or I sense, there was a tripartite god figure, or three different gods, or something that would have revolved around birth, life, and death, and that would have been kind of central to their pantheon of gods, or goddesses, as it were. So I think that when the Christians arrived, they built three separate churches, and they would have named them after the local tridentine sort of arrangement of gods or goddesses, as a way to slowly begin to integrate them initially into the church, into Christianity. So they would have perhaps named the church after the pagan god initially. And if you look up the history of the area, it just says in the kind of in the text, there's little is known, quote unquote, little is known about these churches, why they were here or what they were here for. Now, if you look a mile on from there, across the landscape, you'll see a much bigger abbey that was built subsequent. So what I think was, once they initially had them in, and the bigger abbey that is built also in a ruin, is just one. So once they kind of got them in, it's like a salesman technique: get the foot in the door, and then they brought them along. And anyone else, after you have the military conquest of the land, you can effectively, you control the production of food. So anyone who offers you like a military resistance, you kill them essentially. And there's also evidence of that up where the cairns are, up on top of the hill. You see this large stone wall structure that's like a couple of meters wide. That's obviously been built with a lot of manpower, and it's something prehistoric. Like you're talking something that could be 5,000 years old. And it's mentioned in the local archaeology books here. There's some commentary on it, and there's a lot of question marks. What was it for? But I think like the last bit of the old order before they were finally killed off, made defensive measures to try to resist this incoming wave of Christianity, of the new order, of what eventually became, I suppose, its modern manifestation was the British Army. Up through the last 700 years were the most recent waves of invasion, So you're looking at a very long chip breaking apart of something that couldn't defend itself. Ultimately, I think it couldn't defend itself. And that's the bottom line. And there's an irony in this too, because with all this talk of what's going on and this power structure, if we cannot defend ourselves against them, then it's by the natural order that they should arrive supreme. Really, they will arrive almost by virtue of their natural supremacy, because we have no capacity seemingly to defend against them, unless, as you say, Silas, we hope that they eventually collapse in on top themselves through their own sort of imbalance against the wider natural order.
Oh no, absolutely. That's the point. Yeah, we couldn't defend against them. I mean, for example, let's take, for instance, the Jews have been forcibly converted many, many, many times throughout their history. We can. I think the most prominent example of that, and the most recent in history, is that of the Spanish Inquisition in the late 15th and early 16th centuries, where you had the Jews converting either falsely, as they were called Marranos, or of course supposedly. I say supposedly strongly, as as endearing and authentic Christians, But the thing is, Judaism didn't end, right? Of course, they would most of the time they were feigning conversion, right? So they would outwardly convert, they would outwardly profess either the sort of culture or religious principles that are required by law and by the state of the day. But of course, when they went home, they maintained that culture, they maintained that religious lineage. It never died. They even maintained the Hebrew language. That didn't
Yeah,
really die. It just had to be revived, and brought into the modern day. Hence why it was sort of a lot of words were taken from Arabic, for example, to sort of fill in the blanks.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, so they maintained all of that. That was always maintained. And of course, you had Yiddish and all of these other, but they never, ever, ever assimilated. And the reason they never assimilated was because their druids, their priestly
yeah,
class,
yeah,
didn't allow it, right?
yeah,
Simply because they would literally conjure a victim, almost
yeah.
victim. How would you say it? Sort of false flag events, which would instill a victim complex. Thus, it would instill a sort of defensiveness within the nature of the given congregation in the local area or the region or even the
You,
nation or the continent. We never had that, you know. Our jump in, man. Sorry.
no, just to interject quickly on that, if anyone has the time or the wherewithal, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, if I'm pronouncing that right, he wrote a book called 200 Years Together. I think it's called 200 Years Together. And it's basically a history of the Jews in Russia. I think before the fall of the Tsar, but leading up to that time, and I've listened to bits of it on an audiobook. To be honest, I haven't read it, but I've listened to a good bit of it on audiobook. And he talks exactly what you're saying there about that, about this inability to, they're islands in the stream as such. Like they remain insular and sort of outside society essentially. And as you say, the rabbi is pushing them into this kind of, they're inculcated into this concept of being different and being separate, and even down to the way they work. Like Solzhenitsyn says that they wouldn't do manual or farm work in Russia. That they just wouldn't do it. They thought it was sort of beneath them, or they weren't able to do it. And at a certain time in Russia, the Russian, the powers that be were trying to develop an integration policy for the Jews. They were trying to get them to assimilate into Russian culture. So they decided, look, we have to help these people to sort of, because they were getting into sort of bother. Basically, there was pogroms and there was problems locally. And what was happening was they were running the breweries for a start. Was one of the things they were doing. They were making, spirits, and they'd be buying grain off the locals. And the locals would be basically kind of glorified indentured labourer, and they'd be selling the grain onto the brewery, and they'd be making spirits out of the grain. Then they'd sell the alcohol back to the poor peasants, and the peasants then would be in misery. So they'd be in abject misery. They'd be in complete poverty. They'd be subject to this kind of class of people who were ruling over them, essentially owned all their property, and then whatever produce they had was going to whiskey, which was feeding their alcoholism. So they turned them into alcoholics through sheer misery and poverty, and it just became endemic in the society. But the point Solzhenitsyn makes is that the government, I forget the guy's name, but there was a policy man in Russia in the government at the time who said, right, that we have to get a program going to integrate the Jews into ordinary Russian society, and we have to give them professions, trades. We have to train them. We have to give them a chance to help them along. And bearing in mind, I suppose, the prehistory to this is that literally these were people who had, you know, basically, how do you put it gently? They'd wandered into Russia. They'd found themselves there over a course of time, and they hadn't really integrated properly. So anyway, the Russian authorities at the time said, let's try and make them into farmers. So they assigned them bits of land, and they actually gave them livestock, and they gave them farm equipment. And Solzhenitsyn says after a certain period of time, they had, like, their farm animals were starving, or they were left, in cruel conditions, or left to die because they couldn't manage them. The farm land that they were assigned they sold it. They sold it off, and they broke down the machinery. And they were. It just he paints this picture of total catastrophe, that the Jewish people were just not able to manage this concept of working on the farm. And he says that time and time again, just they slip back into this old ways of basically making the peasants their slaves. They're kind of, enslaving them kind of into, keeping them as their underlings, and let them do the work and let them generate the capital, and back into usury and these old habits and whatever. But that the rabbis essentially as well were preaching this in the internal sphere within Judaism. And another thing he mentions, you might think of the name of this, Silas. There's a certain name for this in Judaism, but there was the Jews in Russia at the time had their own economy within the economy. So this is like something you'd see in the Mormon Church. The Jewish people were sending money into their own internal Jewish sort of revenue system, banking system. So they were all paying into it centrally, and there's a name for it that they have in Judaism. But essentially, what you had was a financial, economic, banking system that was just contained within the Jewish people, that they internally were paying into, and it had nothing to do with, being part of the wider Russian financial arrangement. And so they were completely insular in every way, And Solzhenitsyn's actually there's an audio book of it on YouTube, there's an important caveat on this, because the guy who reads, and this is typical YouTube, right? So you go to hear the book, and obviously it's a sensitive subject, because you're talking about the Jewish people, and it's obviously, we got to be careful about the anti-Semitism thing and the whole lot, and rightly so, okay, rightly so. But the guy, as YouTube have reading the audiobook, is, guess what, a far right dude, right? So he'll read a bit of the book, and then he'll stop, and then he'll interject with his own polemic, and it'll be like listening to, Heinrich Himmler or Adolf Hitler or something on a speech in 1933. He just left by with a load of this far right kind of, yeah, that's because the Jews are this and the Jews are that and the whole lot. And then he'll start reading the book again. And Solzhenitsyn is very balanced, and he's looking at it in a very, like, non-judgmental way. He was looking at it in literally a way of trying to get people to integrate, to build a society, I suppose, a functioning society. But anyway, so yeah, sorry to go off on one a little bit there, but go ahead, Silas.
Oh no, no, absolutely. There was a quote there that I have from the book. We must save Russia if we want to save Jewry. The Jews must fight the molesters of the great country shoulder to shoulder with all other anti-Bolshevik forces. Only by saving Russia can we prevent a Jewish catastrophe. Obviously, I believe he foresaw, what was coming about now. What we're
Mm.
seeing with Zionism is these people are on a completely different wavelength. They are literally antinomian, meaning that in their really a great name for it would be accelerationist. They're accelerationists in terms of eschatology and what have you. And it's complete. Don't get me wrong, the Judaism itself is a racist ethno religion, but that's as just to provide the overarching point, why our religions died, why our languages died, and theirs did not, is because they are vehemently ethno-religious. They have an in-group preference. They have a superior, it's a superior evolutionary strategy to us. It's just a fact. And we can
Yeah,
see
but
it from history as well.
let
Jump
me
in
ask
from.
you. Let me ask you kind of. I'm trying a question, really. I want to try and see if I can get this into a decent question. But, like, I was kind of thinking about this earlier on today. The eschatology, right?
Mhm.
The Zionism. What it's saying in the Zohar, these books, and this profession of, the Kelly Patnoga, and the Jews have the redeemable soul, and the rest of us, goyim, are doomed, and we need to be destroyed, and the spark released so that the savior, what did they call him?
Mashiach.
The Mashiach can come back. When we're all done away with, then the Mashiach can come back, and everything will be hunky dory. But, like, the question, really, what I want to ask is around the stated objective versus the actual objective. So the
Mhm.
stated objective is, as I've mentioned, all in the Zohar, all this I have a problem with the word eschatological.
Eschatological.
Give me it again.
Eschatological.
Yeah, I beg your pardon. Eschatological narrative, right? The end of the world, the master race, the superior people, the Messiah come back. All this. This is the stated objective. Now, the question I want to put to you is: this stated objective was something that was gifted to Judaism. It was handed to Judaism. Somebody wrote it in a book, if you will.
Mhm.
They wrote it down in the pages. They said, right, I'm going to put this in here. The hand of men wrote this. So I'm going to, page 1, you guys are at the top. Page 2, you guys are God's chosen people. page 3. The goyim are your slaves, servants, serfs, underlings. Right, page 4. The goyim can be killed, and they must be killed. Page 5. When the goyim are killed, himself will come back down, and everything will be hunky dory. And page 6, so on and so forth. The world will be yours, and you'll have a 10,000 year Reich all to yourselves, and the rest will be, everything will be great. So someone wrote this into a format, a narrative, a book,
Mm-hmm.
and they had their own priestly class to teach this. It came in through the power structure, came in through the political forces, the military. The entire society was saturated by this stuff.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is this is a stated objective that was gifted or handed into Judaism. It was put into their mouths. It was put into their minds. It was put in front of their eyes by a hand, by the hand of man. So what I'm getting at is the actual objective. Why did that hand of man give that to these people? I think this I suggest, or I put it to you, that this eschatological narrative, that all that we've been talking about in the Zohar and these texts is been done for a reason. That it's not actually what is believed. That it itself is a
I
manipulation.
agree.
What do you think of that?
Oh, absolutely. Well, so the first potential is that, and this is going into the sort of metaphysics, and again, this is very speculative, right? So this isn't even, you could perhaps, I'm not saying it's irrational, but it's perhaps non-rational, which is that what we are living in is perhaps not a simulation, but it's some form of metaphysical controlled space, and it runs on a timer, and there's a sort of purification cycle that occurs every between 6,480 years or 7,000 years, right? Depending on who you're going by. So 6,480 years is, of course, the larger 25,920 years. 6,480 is, of course, a quarter of that larger 25,920 year precessional cycle, as was calculated by Isaac Newton. Or if you're going just straight by the Zoharic idea of the 6 steps of human history, leading to the, of course, the 7,000th year of the rest, or the reset, where effectively there's 1,000 years of the kingdom before the worldly kingdom, before the reset occurs, right? The reset of heaven and earth, and they're remade anew. Even states in the Zohar as well that God will recreate this world as many times as needed, 1,000 times if needed, until he gets the perfect world, until he gets the utopia. And the reason for the utopia, as was coined by the Kabbalist, well, he was outwardly a Catholic, but I mean, he was very highly influenced by many of the Kabbalists of the day. I forget the individual's name, but it was a certain rabbi. I've got it in my notes. It'll actually be in my Pet Goat 2 video, but Thomas More. And he coined the term within his book, Utopia. Interestingly, by the way, that was set in an island called Ceylon, which is the old-fashioned name for Sri Lanka, where we've just had, of course, this Iris Dena sinking some weeks back. But anyway,
Mm.
Utopia literally means the place of nothingness, the place of nothing, right? When you think of utopia, it's not the place of the good. It's not the place of the verdant. It's the place of the cold, the calculated, the hollowed out spaces. The myriad within the crowd. The loss of self, the demeaning totally of the human spirit. So that's the first idea. That this is somehow it's some sort of false promise that's being provided to them because they're in league. They've made a pact with some sort of supernatural, supernal force within the
Let, let,
Kenoma
let,
and
let me let
jump
me
in, man.
just let me just jump on that now, because what I'm suggesting is that they're being manipulated by an inner circle of men, of humans. That this is not like what I'm getting at is with the narrative, with the oh my god,
Eschatological.
eschatological, with the eschatological stuff and this whole sort of master race kind of thing that's in Jude, they're being manipulated, that they've been
Well,
set up to believe this crap, and they are, target number one of a
that
victim of a psyop.
well, if I may, that is the
Yeah.
second potential option. So the second
Okay.
option that we see, I don't know if you're familiar with Eustace Mullins' The Curse
Yes,
of
a little
Canaan.
bit.
Yes. I think it's at page 108, 109. I only know this because my brother's in the midst
Yeah.
of reading it, but and that's where he's got to. And so I was sort of having a flick through the pages. But to refresh my memory. But he talks about the Ghibellines and the Guelphs. And the Ghibellines were he doesn't state it this way, right? And actually, this isn't my idea. This came from an individual called Charles Giuliani. He's actually a rather,
Yeah.
I think he's a good thinker and he's a good researcher on these types of topics. But he had this idea, which was sort of echoed by Eustace Mullins in this Curse of Canaan, just under different sort of terminology. But the Ghibellines are what Charles Giuliani would call the priestly and kingly class, right? Now, the
Yeah.
way the quote unquote ancient slavery, as the Luhma say, the national anthem of the French Republic would put it, is the ancient, it's this sort of ancient form of the status quo, which was that the priestly class would choose the kingly class and empower the kingly class vis-a-vis the sort of divine right of kings,
Yeah.
the mandate of heaven, and the priestly class would utilize the king as a sort of masquerade, as a mask to their own power,
Yeah.
so that if
Yes.
there was ever a revolution, the king would lose his head and it wouldn't be the priestly class, right? So that it would die en masse. S- But the thing is, the problem with that is that it's not accelerationist. If you have these ideas, yes, they're found in the Zohar in their most, I would say, distilled and extreme form, but you can find them, of course, in the Torah, and you can find them in the Talmud. The Talmud is a sort of bridge between the Zohar and Torah, right? And you can see the thought beginning to evolve in that way anyway. But with the priestly class, when they're in charge, you get a status quo, meaning it's very stagnant. It's things don't happen quickly, right?
Yeah.
Because the whole of society is set up on this sort of hyper conservative, conservative religious structure, and it's very difficult to change the culture flexibly and maneuver it. So you can, of course, get to the eschatological goal. However, what we find around about, I would say around about the religious wars in Europe, right? There or thereabouts, you start to see these sorts of revolutions beginning from the ground up, or what appear to be from the ground up. They're in fact funded by merchant class, and the merchant class itself came out of, for example, the synagogue, right? Like what you were mentioning, they would collectively pool their money together in that of the temples, right? The temple storehouse or treasury, which is called the Odzah in Hebrew. Um, there's two names for it. This sort of collectivized, um, sort of parallel community kitty, if you will, and also the loans as well, the interest free loans. It's either called Gemach or Gemachim, which is a sort of it's actually an acronym for Gemilut Hasidim, which is the acts of loving kindness. Hasidim for the observant is where we get the Hasid, which is literally it's the same idea, loving kindness, and or the Kahal. So that was more Eastern Europe, to be honest. But so it's what you're getting is states within states, and what ends up happening is See, once you're running these, let's just call it what it is, scams, right? When you're running these scams, these basically rentier-like economies where you are the middleman and you're effectively dealing in abstractions and nothingness and fiat, and
Yeah.
you're getting in return for that real capital. What you tend to find is once you build up a sort of circular loop of an economy like that, you start to make quite a hell of a lot of money. So
Yeah.
then what actually, of course you can put it in the treasury, the priest still has control over it, but eventually it gets to the point where the priest can't deal with all that money. So
Yeah.
he has to divest that power into, of course, a Mamadot class, a lay division to help sort of service the priest, the priest's needs in terms of the accounting. So this builds a financier class. This is where we get the Frankfurter families, such as the Rothschilds, the Oppenheimers, the Devums, what have you, right? I mean, the list is endless. Even the Epsteins from Prague. So what all of this is effectively the priestly class started to lose less and less and less power, right? Less prestige. And what started to happen is the financier class took over. These are the third faction, and they had a different idea of how to run these countries that they controlled, right? And the way to do it, they believed, was through democracy, republics. So you have the political class that you would change out every 4 years, as opposed to the king that would be in there for life. And
Yeah.
that allowed you more flexibility, more maneuverability, and
Yeah.
it allowed the same structure, and it also empowered them as well. So this is the modern form of slavery, right? And
Mm.
so effectively what you're seeing is with, as you get with financiers, because they're bureaucrats, they don't really have a sort of, they don't view things as in a humanistic light. They wouldn't view, for example, the Torah in the light of, sort of, what would the word be, balance or equanimity or harmony, right? Yes, of course, we believe we're different from the Gentiles, but are we actually going to, push the eschatology as fast and as fervently as, as to destroy the entire world? No, the priestly class would not, but the financier class would, right? Because for them, all they care about is profit. The profit at the end of this eschatology is a world unto themselves.
Yeah.
It's a complete and utter. It's literally the Pax. It's what many have called the Pax Judaica. I call it the Pax Kabbalica, which is that you have a digital system of pure techno neo feudalistic serfdom, where literally corporations will own you from cradle to grave. You will be marked with the mark of the beast, if you will. Meaning that your entire life will be mathematically sort of conditioned uh, vis-a-vis a precise algorithm and through predictive analytics. So all of this creates really what is fundamentally a perfect system of slavery, right? For, of course, those who remain. So the only way to get to that point, though, is to create a series of conflagrative, highly um, sort of highly, what would the word be? Um, uh, uh, sort of bombastic, I think would be the word. Highly bombastic events, false flags, justification pretexts, so that you can justify and rationalize this system of slavery. And so yeah, and all the time, all the while, what the Kabbalists call you're creating yechidim in the nations. Yechidim is essentially it means solitary in Hebrew. So you're basically turning everyone into these atomized individuals. So that's the Hebrew term for it, yechidim. Um,
Yeah.
so that's the
It's
other. That's the more logical reason, I would say. Beyond the
ju-
metaphysics.
just as a footnote to that, you mentioned the Kahal. the Kahal, isn't it? The word you used.
Kahal, yeah.
Yeah, that's what Solzhenitsyn was. He was talking about that in Russia, that they had their, the Jews had their own sort of internal financial,
Yeah.
I don't know, system, banking system or economic system that was apart from the
Oh no,
exchequer.
they had their own internal taxation system.
Yeah, and that was
Yeah.
the Kahal, and it was just as a footnote to what you've said there.
Oh no, absolutely. I mean, everything from, in Germany and France and even in Spain and Britain, they called it the Gemach or Gamachim. Effectively, it's the same system. Interestingly, the Gamachim came over. That was used in the Americas when they set up in Annapolis and even in places like Brazil. They also set up, of course, a slave trade there as well. Um,
So
but yeah,
if you're right in saying that where
mhm.
the priestly class, sort of couldn't handle the money after a certain point and divested it onto the financiers. You mentioned, Rothschild and Co. Maybe in the in modernity, as it were.
Yeah.
Um, how would you agree then that the financier class has little or no interest as such in Judaism?
Oh no, they don't
Or
believe in God.
right?
No,
Well,
God,
is
God to them
let,
is
let
just
me
a control structure.
Well, can you expand a bit on that? Because it
Mhm.
seems like, how can they marry the eschatological kind of narrative, which is based on the Mashiach kind of arriving on earth? How can they marry that with a kind of as you say,
Because
no belief in God?
because Mashiach is them. Mashiach is
Ah,
literally a spirit. It's a modality of thinking. It's a modality of being. Mashiach
okay.
isn't real. So you have actually twin messiahs or twin Mashiachs, which is you have the Mashiach ben Yosef, which is the political messiah that's still yet to come, or we're in the process of Mashiach ben Yosef. It depends on how you interpret it. And then the one, so of course Mashiach ben Yosef, the political messiah, is paving the way for the spiritual messiah of Mashiach ben David. Now that actually might be a descendant of David per se, but it probably is not. It'll be simply just the spirit, the zeitgeist, if you will, of the people. Um, but Theodor Herzl, the founder of Zionism, he stated quite emphatically on record that he does not believe in God. Doesn't believe in God. So he's totally secular. I actually think he was an agnostic. So um, there you go. The what you've got to remember, right? Eschatologies are effectively the most strategic and effective way to control large swathes of people
Yeah,
over centuries. Because what an eschatology does is it's effectively a hyperstitional engine that
yeah,
almost possesses the people, right? It's the reason that the Druids died off, and it's the reason all of our folk religions also died off. It's not just because we weren't ethno religious fanatics.
yeah.
The reason we weren't ethno religious fanatics is because we didn't believe in an eschatology. We had no destiny, right? The,
Okay,
the Jewish people do, or at
okay.
least the Zionists believe they do. So the idea is that the, the future is there, right? It's within their grasp, right? Or to be, holy or spiritual or to be aligned with the divine, you have to pursue this. So it almost possesses you. It alters your behavior. It maintains also group cohesion as well. And you can do many terrible things if you believe all of the evil that you do is working towards some sort of eschatological or end times good during Armageddon. So effectively, the future is rewriting its past to ensure that the conditions for its creation are there and in a foundational and also I guess tangible sense so it can be manifested. Of course, the eschatology's past is our present, So this is where you get the retrocausality idea. But effectively, you can look at any other system. So look at, for example, look at religions, right? Look at religions without eschatologies. We have Druidism, done. The sort of Gosa or Germanic folk religion, done, dead. You had the Scandinavian Norse religions, all done, dead. The Arabian pagan religions, done, dead. Hellenism, dead. They're all dead. The reason they're dead is because when they got the Jews, many times have been given that same choice: convert or die, right? Now, yes, they convert, but it's a false conversion, or they will actually die in the case of for example, the Maccabean revolt, or in the case of the revolts against the Romans, the Bar Kokhba revolt, for example, comes to mind. It all ended in complete and utter disaster. And the Jews even, you had that one in Masada, the fort of Masada. The Romans besieged them and managed to breach, through the pure ingenuity of the Romans, they managed to build a mound up that they could then besiege and break into, not besiege, breach and break into Masada. And when they got in there, all the Jews had pulled, they had pulled lots and had killed, basically, committed a mass unaliving event. So that shows you the tenacity, the tenacity when they were given the choice, right, convert or die. They converted, but it was false, or of course they were willing to die. You can't say the same for any of these other religions, which tells you that the religion itself has greater control over its adherents, of course, behaviorally and mentally. You could even say this ties in spiritually as well. But what you're seeing is that it's the eschatology that allows the group cohesion. It allows narratives to maintain themselves over centuries. With it's almost like a homeostatic control loop. And if you don't have that, eventually you become susceptible to the ravages of time and to the ravages of entropy and to the ravages of human greed or human fallibility, right? So the eschatology is how you control a people's over, hundreds or even thousands of years, as we've seen. I mean, we could look at the other alternatives. You can carry it on vis-a-vis the blood. That fails, right? If you're carrying this on hereditarily, in terms of I don't know, the priestly line or the power itself, in terms of the kingly succession and the line of succession, that eventually will die off, and of course the nation will cease to be. It'll have a lack of cohesion, and it'll just fall apart. You can do it through, of course, just mere religion and mere spirituality, or mere sort of some form of a pantheon of gods without any eschatology. That will also fall apart, as we've seen. There's several other ways you can pass power on, but none of them really comes close to eschatologies. They are they're literally a sort of wonder weapon within the minds of man. They just will control anything for any, generations upon generations of time. It's
And
quite amazing.
just for the sake of definition, when we say eschatological, we're talking about a prophecy, a belief that the people have of their own Messiah, Mashiach, coming back to them, a destiny, as it were, that at a certain period in time, this event is going to happen, and you're destined. You're destined for this. And like, can you
Mhm.
expand a bit on what exactly is I suppose, the eschatological narrative, specifically within Judaism? Does it mention like an end of the world scenario? Is it Book of Revelations? Is it like, what's the what's the lowdown, as they say, or even a rough idea of what does it entail?
Yeah, so the eschatology is the study of the last things, quite literally from
Mm,
Greek. So it's the study of the end of history, if you will. If we understand
mm,
history as this sort of machine that trundles along and it's trying to get to a certain destination. Um, and again, that's the only way you can actually maintain focus within a nation if they believe there is some sort of thing they're aiming for. You just, I mean, just as a sort of side note, you can't have a neoliberal country that is just this geographical area where transactions take place. If you don't have a destiny, if this isn't beyond values. If you don't have a destiny, a shared aim for the future and how you want to envision the future and establish the future, then you functionally don't have a nation. It's dead. There's nothing there. But in terms of Judaism and the Jewish eschatology, so I'll just give the general rundown,
yeah,
and this is from the Torah. The belief is that eventually that you will have an end of days, which is the sort of well, the Kabbalists call it the Tikkun Olam, which is the rectification of the world,
yeah,
because they believe they must repair God. Right, you repair
yeah,
God through effectively going through the alchemical magnum opus, um,
yeah,
which is you begin at Negredo putrefaction. You putrefy the world, you
yeah,
calcinate it, burn it to a sort of white crisp or a hollowness,
mm,
and then, of course, you bring it into the Rubeda and the Red Dawn state. And that would be what they call the Halam Haba, which is the world to come, and you'll have the resurrection of the dead and the Messianic age, and effectively everyone will come to bow down before Yahweh, and all shall come to bow down and serve the Jews. Right now, that's from the Torah. They believe that they are everywhere Jacob has stepped shall be their dominion, which is effectively at this point all of the world, because they were nomadic for a vast portion of their history. So the idea is they will have a world dominion. However, the, both the Talmud and then later on with the Zohar and Lurianic Kabbalah, this that idea was taken. Basically it was they wanted to accelerate it. Right, that's the only way I can describe it. So they
mm,
put out specific. Don't get me wrong. It's still very mystical language. But once you demystify that mystical language, what you find in terms of the kernel of the eschatology in the Zohar, for example, is this I and the Talmud too, arguably, is that you actually have geopolitical plans on how to bring about what is written about in the Torah, where, for example, in
mhm,
Isaiah, it talks about, kings shall be your foster fathers and queens your nursing mothers, and they will bow down before you, all of the nations, and they shall lick the dust from the soles of your feet, things like that. Now, again, whatever that's, but when you start to write down, like in the Zohar and the Talmud, actual plans, geopolitical plans, don't get me wrong, they're still fairly, they're not specific, but they're specific enough in terms of what we're going through right now, where you actually have to think, is this being followed? In my opinion, yes, it is being followed. Um, One example is Persia will destroy Rome or Esau, which is effectively the modern day USA in the West, in the war just prior to the the return of the Mashiach, Ben Yosef, and um, from there, the West will be destroyed. It will be burnt. All that shall remain is but a stump. That's a sort of idea, an image that's from the Torah, and it mentions that then Persia will ascend. Um, or in the Zohar, it calls it Ishmael. Islam will ascend. Will So once they've defeated the West, they will go after Israel, but Israel will defeat them. The Mashiach will return and defeat them right at the last moment, just before Jerusalem is blotted out um, from the weapons of Persia or Ishmael, and of course in other interpretations it's called Gog and Magog. So you have this idea that there's going to be a world war, basically World War III, right before the tikkun the rectification is concluded. The Mashiach returns and ushers in the Ha'olam Haba, the world to come, and effectively both Ishmael and Esau will destroy themselves. And of
Yeah.
course, Ishmael will fight one desperate final war against Israel before they're also wiped out as well. So, or subdued, I think is the word that's used. So not perhaps fully eviscerated, but they're subdued. So everything you're
Subdue.
seeing is jump in, man. Sorry.
I just know the word subdued beneath the Jews, like.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. In terms of the pronunciation, I guess, yeah, yeah.
It's gonna be
But that's
subdued.
the idea. That's the idea. The gist of it.
Just yeah, man. It just as like as I have it in my head, right? Ismail being Islam. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah,
Okay, so just to bring, just as a kind of a side note on some of this stuff, like with this current kind of conflict situation that we have, America, Israel, Iran, um, actually, a family member, her husband was over in, I think, Saudi, and he's an Irish guy. He was working over there, and to make a long story short, he got stuck there for a little while. He's back now. There was no problem, but they had a bit of they had a bit of concern about this conflict breaking out, and so I met him a couple of days ago. I said, "Well, how did you get on?" And I, got back home eventually. And there was problems with flights and whatnot. And he goes, and I said, "Well, what's the talk on the ground? Like, what's the?" Well, one thing he said to me is that there was surprise that Iran was attacking Muslim countries. And I kind of thought this was a little bit interesting because you have this concept, as you say, Ishmael. And previously, we would have had this idea of the world of Islam, that Islam is one coherent entity that's a brotherhood that would never, like, they would never betray each other, or they would never, enter into a civil war within Islam. But it seems to be that kind of an unusual side effect of this conflict that we have um, Muslim countries attacking other
well,
Muslim countries, ostensibly.
this is part of prophecy, ultimate eschatological prophecy in Judaism.
Hmm.
I've actually got the one from this is actually from the Talmud. So it's a midrashic text called Yalkut Shimoni, and it's a commentary, an exegesis, a religious commentary on Isaiah 60, Remez 499, and it talks about this global conflict that we're actually going through right now. And like
Yeah,
what you're saying, they're attacking Persia is attacking Arabia. So this is what Rabbi Yitzhak said, quote, the year in which the King Messiah is revealed, all the kings of the nations of the world will be provoking each other. The king of Persia will provoke the king of Arabia, and the king of Arabia will go to Edom, the west or Rome, to take counsel from them. The king of Persia will then go and destroy the entire world, and all the nations of the world will be trembling and terrified, and Israel will be terrified and panic stricken, saying, where shall we go and where shall we come? And God will say to them, my children, do not be afraid. Everything I have done only for your sake. Why are you afraid? Do not fear. The time of your for your redemption has arrived. And then there's also another little thing I wanted to add, and it's quite interesting. Let's see if I can find it. Um, oh God, where is it? Oh, here we go. Yeah, yep. Yeah, I think this is it. I think this is the one. Is it? Damn. Bloody hell. Trying to find these things right the last
Well,
minute. I do apologize, man.
just as you're
Yeah.
searching there, like I mean, not to put too fine a point on it or to be too blunt about it, and pardon my French, but like to be blunt about it, this is basically a load of horseshit that was spun in antiquity and fed into the Jewish people to prep them up for this
Oh yeah.
messy overdose, like cocaine overdose, where they're just like wide eyed and giddy and just
Yep.
hysterical about all this stuff. And they're essentially in a kind of a psychological state of frenzy, and they're just beholden to this idea, this spirit that has been
Mhm.
sort of just like psyoped into their minds, kind of. And these
Oh, totally.
from these
Yeah.
old and this old priestly class.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's utter tripe, totally insane. But I mean, because it exists on a sort of it exists as paralogy. It's beyond logic. You're dealing with sort of non-rational vectors here. So there's actually no way to rationalize to them and say or reason with them and say, listen, this is all insane. And it's not just them. Of course, we're dealing
Yeah,
with also the utter insanity in the evangelical class who believe
yeah,
we have to support Israel because Israel are going to initiate Armageddon and then Jesus
yeah.
will return. So they're also mad
Yeah.
hatters as well.
But the madness itself is interesting, and you, I forget the exact way the word you used there. The vector of what did you use that term?
Paralogy.
Yeah, can you just define that for me briefly?
Well,
Paralogy.
paralogy is literally beyond. It's beyond logic. Literally
Yeah,
means beyond logic. So it's
yeah,
this idea that, for example, um, I'll give you a precise example of this. Right during the event of 2020, when people were dying from the needlecraft, let's say, right,
yeah,
or again, it didn't look like this thing was as transmissible as it was, or it didn't look airborne, or it didn't look as lethal as it was. They would still fire the numbers up even though the numbers were perhaps low, even though perhaps, of course, the evidence didn't pan out, they would still push it nonetheless, and um, not it's not just the politicians were pushing it. That's of course, their job as sort of a treasonous little swine that they are. But it's that the, the ordinary man and woman and even the nurses and doctors uh, who perhaps had knowledge of this, the you know they had knowledge of epidemiology, at least a sort of basic understanding of it. They should have realized that this was all fiction. They didn't speak up for the truth. In fact, they wholeheartedly believed the lie and they pushed the lie through primarily emotional language, emotive language, or just pure gaslighting. Um, all the while, though, there was a sort of cognitive dissonance in their mind, and they simply they saw what they were doing as, yes, we're sort of lying, we're inflating the fear, but we're doing it for a good reason. You know, we're again the ends justify the means. That's also paralogy in and of
yeah.
itself. So it's anything that goes beyond logic. It's these sort
But
of non-rational things.
but this, as you say, there beyond logic. Like these were seeds that were sown in the darkness of ignorance and possibly of an uneducated mind or an uneducated people or a superstitious people. Basically, what I'm kind of trying to get at here is in some part of antiquity, perhaps an illiterate pagan mass were initially led into these kinds of narratives, and these seeds were sown in them, and by virtue of the fact that these seeds were sown at an earlier time, they were kind of passed down to generation, and the roots from these seeds have grown down through the generations, passed from mother to daughter, father to son, etc. And like the modern manifestation of it, as you say there, beyond reason, beyond rationale, because of that deeper resonance that goes back into a time of darkness, into a time of perhaps illiteracy, of superstition. Um, the resonance is still there from that dark age in the modern time. So that's why it seems so like an anachronism. It seems like something that shouldn't belong now, because we're in a kind of in hyper modernity now, and we have you know here in the middle, we have the AI and we have all the tech around us and everything, and it's like the silicon world, right? And in the middle of all this, you have this sort of medieval um messianic fervor, and a belief, people who are beholden by a sub rational belief that's emanating up from their bellies that they have no control over. It's like a kind of an addictive reflex, and they're just completely, electrified by it. And it just seems to me that the framework for that is in a deep is an coming from an older time. And
Oh no, absolutely, yeah,
there's
absolutely, yeah.
one other interesting point there, and I want to point out what I suspect is a kind of an ironic, the word will come to me in a second. Um, it's two things which don't belong together, or it seems to be at odds with each other, and one of them is this idea of destiny. So, like, if the Messiah is destined to come, or if I'm destined to drive a Ferrari, and that Ferrari will come to me in the following 2 months at some point in time, I just basically need to sit back, and it's my destiny. Therefore, it's going to come, and no matter what I do or don't do, if it's in my destiny, it shall be. Like, it shall be. But this, as you were pointing out there, and I think you're this concept of accelerationism, where various feats, endeavors, and proprietary events and machinations and engineering models and diagrams and various initiatives are being put in place to hasten the destiny, and, as to use your word, to accelerate toward destiny. But the point is, like, why would you need to, if it's your destiny anyway? No aspect of accelerationism makes sense, because it's going to happen. Like, it shall be. So you shouldn't necessarily have to accelerate, in that direction as such, if it's going to happen anyway. But it seems to be, as you're pointing out there, that yet they are, kind of engaging in things to propel toward. You know what I mean? But it seems to undermine then the concept of it being a destiny, being a fait accompli, that it was going to happen. So why would you need to invest any energy or will toward it? Like, so it's in a way as if they're undermining um, this idea of it being a destiny, like that they're working toward. Well, why would you working toward it if it's going to happen? It's going to happen anyway, according
Oh,
to your holy book.
well, here's another idea as well. Even the notion of the Hebrews or the Israelis. Look at most of the so-called national dishes of the Israelis. Most of
Yeah.
them are appropriated from all around,
Oh,
that area. Even the modern Hebrew language is appropriated as well. A large swathes of it,
yeah.
its syntax, its vocabulary is appropriated from Arabic and other Semitic languages that surround that area. But actually, funnily enough, there is actually Hebrew concepts. It's called the achishena, which is the idea of hastening something, right? It literally, it's like a declaration. It means I will hasten the ha'olam haba, the world to come. And then you also You have another concept which is called Bayita, which is the idea of something being in its appointed time. So the idea is that everything that you do to hasten is itself actually a sort of fatalistic thing. It's part of the cycle. It's part of the destiny, right?
Mm.
And um, you go into the Zohar,
Ah,
and there's
yeah,
a sort
yeah,
of there's a lot of it that's even talks about energy and this sort of magical idea. Magic meaning, with the K, which is the idea of you're altering the perceptual fields of the world. Hence why they had to Christianize and Islamize effectively 50% or plus of the planet, so that all of the prayers, all of the thinking, everything could be all of the energy, effectively the psychic energy, could be funneled through this sort of eschatological convergence, this again, as I said, psychic funnel into that of the Holy Land, thus energizing this exact. I totally agree with what you're saying. This sort of 5th century BC madness. It's not even 5th century BC. I mean, it's even before that. We're talking Bronze Age madness. Um, but yeah, all of that is effectively to bring that about. It's
but it's
the
like, is
unique
it, it's like,
disorder
it's like,
appeal.
it's like as if you said to me, right, Seelberg, it's your destiny to be a millionaire in 5 years' time. And I thought, geez, that's great news. And I'm gonna kind of make sure this
No, but
happens.
it's
And
it's 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 different from that though. Sorry to
and
interject. It's
yeah, go
see
ahead.
the way they look at it is right. So we've sort of went over that idea before, that to create the world, God had to deconstruct himself and effectively die and inter himself into matter. So the
Yeah,
idea is that they must thus repair God, right? They must ascend the the
yeah,
four the four worlds, right, into the place of emanation where God emanated from, so that they can join with God, or even become God, right? And this ties in with even the word El,
yeah,
which is of course in Hebrew God, of course Allah,
yeah,
Il, Ilah, Akkadian, all the way back to Akkadian means God. But funnily enough, you look at the sort of Semitic roots of that, and it actually means strength or power. It's
yeah,
it's derived from it's morphed from that. So when they think of God, they think of power. That's sort of hardwired into
yeah,
the Semitic language. Interestingly, it's different actually from how Europeans and our word for God comes about. But nonetheless, the idea is that everything they're doing is effectively it's the days of creation, right? So they're going through the 6 days of creation, then the seventh day of rest. So they have to be like God. It's like they're LARPing as God. They believe that
yeah,
they are God. So to create to create creation, to create life, you have to go through the birth pangs. So all of this is destiny. The birth pangs themselves are destiny. When the mother is pushing, right? Is she actually consciously pushing, and going through the contractions, or are those happening sort of, just as a matter of course? Is she consciously pushing the baby out, or is it simply just our mind, our instincts have taken over and pushing it out? So the idea is that they don't necessarily believe that they are consciously doing this. They never chose this life, if you will, right? The life chose them. So they're it's almost it. I mean, it's really hard to explain, but it's almost like if you thought, think of the Irish, right? And the
yeah,
Irish just all of a sudden thought that they were the most superior people on earth. Not just superior, they thought that they were actually the only ones who had both a human soul or an animal soul and a divine soul. They were the only ones with the seed of the
yeah,
divine soul of God,
mhm,
and that they believe. The belief is that when they go through all of this chaos, when the world destroys itself, they don't actually believe that's evil. They actually believe that they're helping people purify themselves, getting rid of their animal soul, and they're going to allow in the world only the divine souls to remain, right? Which there's 600,000 in number. So that's the belief. That's what's and really it goes beyond. Actually think a lot of them do believe this. I mean, not perhaps not literally, but it's a very convenient thing for them, right? It's just it's convenient. I mean, if overnight I was living in a country that was telling me, by the way, Silas, you know, you and all of your kin are effectively of God, and the rest of the world are just a bunch of heathen yokels that are destined to be purified in the great fire to come. I mean, there's a certain power that's derived from that. You know, I think that's what's fueling it. I do. I think it's honestly quite human in terms of what's fueling all of this, and it comes down to greed and power and all of this, and
But
lust for power. Sorry for interjecting, man.
not at all. But that's kind of like it's not a destiny if you work to make it happen. Like if you're putting all your will, energy into making something happen, like I don't know, getting a degree in economics, and you're studying, it wasn't your destiny to get that. Like you worked toward it. So it's like, do you get what I'm kind of saying? It seems to me is that like another kind of psyop. Oh, look, it's your destiny, but you got to do all this stuff. Like they're being pushed toward it, or schooled toward it, or there's a move toward it, like in actual machinations and energy. And then at the end, they arrive. You arrive at your destination, and oh, look, if this is your destiny. No, 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 that wasn't my destiny. I worked for this. Like I manifested this. So is there some delineation to be made there at all, or?
Yes, in some sense, but the way they view it is see the problem with the West. The West are far too rational, and
Yeah.
it says that in the Kabbalah as well. Um, I have to agree with it. What it states, that, and don't get me wrong, the West was developed like that. It was developed to be this, to be Gevura, which is the sort of cold intellect of judgment, and it's this idea that um, eh, effectively, if you cleave to reason too much, you'll eventually reason yourself out of existence. And it's
Yeah.
exactly what you're seeing in the West. Everything is about morality, even though no one has any morals, right? And we're all about ethics, though no one has any ethics. So a lot of these things are just merely social sort of virtue signaling, or just sort of social signaling in and of itself. But everything you're seeing in the West, all of the sort of self-deprecation, is all based around reason. It's based around fundamentally sort of a hyper radical self criticism. And yeah, I mean, we're reasoning ourselves out of existence. There's a lot of things in life that can't be necessarily explained, and
Yeah.
it's that liminal part that these Kabbalists have sort of grasped, and are are
Mm.
utilizing, um, to effectively establish
Okay.
what will be a world dominion. So I just lastly, I think, for for them for them, they only employ reason when it comes to strategy and strategizing. They
Mm.
don't look at this as in the lens of reason, because reason itself is naturally deconstructive. And what this is it's something that it's a key to literally the kingdom of heaven. And why the hell would you give up the key to the kingdom of heaven? I do agree, though, it's not destiny. They're actually forcing this thing. Uh, you know, I do agree with you, but when you call something destiny, that has a great sense of gravitas and
Exactly.
weight to it,
Yeah.
Exactly.
You get drunk on it.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yep.
No, I think you hit on a very kind of critical, interesting point there about reason and the rational mind, and that and it's a sensitive topic to kind of say stuff like that, but I'm going to say, like, I've always had the hint, and I don't know if it was within the art or within some of the surrealist movement or something within Judaism, that there was some finger on the pulse of, as you said it there, the liminal, or that which cannot be explained. And I think that's where they have the edge, actually, psychologically, over the West. And I think that was whatever Russian was it. Always one of their generals. I think he said the West are not prepared for what we have in store for them. And I think what they've had in store is all of what we're seeing is from this liminal. It's from the edges. It's from that which cannot be understood, and it's that which manipulates us on a very deep level. And it pushes forces around in us that we can't really, that we don't understand or can't understand. Well, no, obviously we could, but that we've been shielded from, or as you say it there, the reason itself has kind of blinded us
Yeah.
from it, like, because as you're saying, the Western mind was sculpted. It's honed, uh, you know, at the blacksmith's forge of reason. And we're coming from. What was the term you used there? There was mention of it in some of the old Jewish texts, or there was a term you used, that it was made in this way on purposely, like. But I think that's a very, very interesting point, and that in fact, much of the psyop, much of the
Hmm.
propaganda, manipulation, the shadows, and the maneuvering deep within us is all comes from that liminal space that the Western mind cannot penetrate. It can't understand it. It can't grasp it,
No.
because it's essentially ungraspable anyway. But I think you can have a resonant understanding of it, like, if you will, a kind of a instinctive feel of it. And I think that's where the sorcery is, as it were, of the modern age of manipulation. That they have a finger inside in that dark pot, and they're able to pull stuff out of the cauldron, as it were.
Well,
And
that's why I think they destroyed our folk religions. I think we had a grasp of that, but they destroyed the folk religion because they had to bring in Christianity, which is effectively, out of all of the Abrahamic religions, it's the most accustomed to intellectualism and philosophy. It's a sort of philosophical breed of Judaism, um, mixed with sort of the remnants or residue of European previous European folk religions. Um, they, effectively they have shaped us into a machine of pure reason, you know, and or a machinery rather of pure reason. But you know, a machinery of pure reason is effectively just a golem, right? It can be easily used and abused and directed here, there, and everywhere. I mean, I always laugh at the nationalists when they say, you know, if we just have more children, right? Have more children. That's not going to work, right? It's not the numbers that are the issue. I mean, if you go back to the 1900s and the so-called, Europeans, let's just say the all of Europe, right? Because that's what's counted at least. But these people would all be classified as white. I mean, if you've ever been to the south of Spain, I mean, these people are a different color from people in John O'Groats, I'll say, right? But they're all counted as sort of whites and European and whatever. But they were 500 to 600 million in number. Now, of course, because the world population at the time supposedly was 1.2 billion or so, that accounted, of course, we accounted for 36%. Now, fast forward to today, if you account for all of the quote unquote white populations, European populations from all over the globe, we account to something like 900 million or something, right? Now, what? Now we're only 9% of the world population. That is actually because, of course, the rest of the world has gained access to Western medicine, and childhood mortality rates have fallen, and blah, 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 blah. So we're a smaller percentage of the world, but we're not necessarily lesser in number, right? Now, yeah, sure, our demographics aren't great, but what I'm saying is the demographics themselves aren't the the be all and end all. That's not what makes the nation. What makes the nation is the sort of lifeblood of the feeling of destiny. There's a word for it that eludes me right now, but it's this sort of ungraspable sensation of destiny, something you actually can't put in words. And it doesn't just draw you to a sort of romanticism. It draws you actually to actually exercise the will of of your nation or tribe or what have you on the world stage. Be that in whatever way, be it economic, religious, spiritual, artistic, and all of this really creates a very cohesive and stable culture going forward. That is what creates a bedrock, a cultural bedrock for a sort of assuredness of demography going forward, right? Positive demography. Israel has this. Israel is, in fact, Israel, by demographics alone, is the only nation, the only developed nation that has positive total fertility rates, meaning they're above 2.1. I think they're actually 2.6 or 7, something like that. So, they are growing, while, of course, the rest of the developed nations are not. So there's an interesting sort of uniqueness there that you're seeing with Israel. But, needless to say, just to finish the point, I don't actually know where I noted this from in the Talmud. It definitely is in the Talmud. I'll go try and find it, but it's basically a commentary on Isaiah 60:22, which is the same idea I was mentioning. I, the Lord, in its time, B'gita, I will hasten it, Achishena. But we hear from the Talmud, from Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. He answers this idea. He states, if they are worthy, I will hasten it, Achishena. If they are not worthy, it will come in its appointed time, Bitha. So the belief is that if you are worthy, you'll hasten it yourself. You'll basically do you'll do the heavy lifting for God. And if you're not worthy, then it'll of course just happen in its appointed time, as God wills it. So that's the belief. That's the belief there as well, at least from the Talmud, or at least one of the rabbis within the Talmud, the various tractates. Yes, yeah. So it's that's my opinion upon that. I think ultimately everything you see in the world, all of the developments, all of that is really based around this notion of eschatology, And by the way, just to mention something really quickly as well, I made this connection between the Amorites and the Hyksos, and in my book Blood on the Sand, and also then later on the Hyksos became the Shepherd Kings, became of course the Israelites. So you actually read from, this is from, yeah, so they were described by contemporary writers as troublesome nomads who dwelt in the periphery of civilized society. This is the Amorites they were describing, and were believed to be one of the causes of the downfall of the third dynasty of Ur. That's the Neo-Sumerian Empire. This is circa 2112 BC to 2004 BC. The rump state that developed out of the collapsed Akkadian Empire. They also collapsed the Akkadian Empire vis-a-vis mass migration, interestingly, and also through famine. And they were pastoralists, so they would get their cows to overgraze the land of the largely agricultural Acadians, and basically they starved the Acadians with bad yields and harvest. Quote, the Martu who know no grain, the Martu, the Amorites, who know no house nor town, the boors of the mountains, the Martu, the Amorites, who digs up truffles, who does not bend his knees to cultivate the land, who eats raw meat, who has no house during his lifetime, who is not buried after death. So, and interestingly, the Amorites' land, I forget what it's called now. It's actually almost exactly like the land of the promised land from the Euphrates to the brook of the Nile. Almost to exactly as per the Amorites' sort of dwelling areas. I forget what they call it, the land of the Amorites. But yeah, so there you go. Just to echo that, what was it, 200 years by Solzhenitsyn. So, how many things change, but a lot of things just seem to stay the same. Yeah.
There's a Matrix line for you from
Yeah.
not Morpheus, but his lover, Jada Pinkett Smith.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's what they always say to each other. Some things change and some things stay the same, or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Oh, and by the way, just to tie that in with the Torah, you have from Joshua 24:13, quote, I gave you a land on which, this is Yahweh speaking to the Israelites, I gave you a land on which you had not labored, and cities that you had not built, and you dwell in them. You eat the fruit of vineyards and olive orchards that you did not plant. Yeah, so it's effectively what you're seeing is it's just accelerationism. They've just taken this thing and they've taken it to the extreme, and it's being developed by highly, as the centuries went by, a far more financially flushed class, effectively a financier class. They take over from the priestly class, um, and they have a hand in informing the religious theology, which eventually becomes the end times prophecy and agenda. So that's what I think has went on there.
What was this in pertaining to?
Oh, we've been speaking about eschatology. Zeal will be back in 5. We're
Yeah.
speaking about eschatology and primarily, of course, Jewish eschatology. We are speaking about the U.S.-Iran war. We're speaking about many things. Also,
Yeah,
the
all the cold
yeah
topics in the world today. Yep.
yeah pretty much everything that matters. Yeah, as we go into this sort of
And
weird
I
and
say
wonderful
that
and
as like
intrepid
a
age.
pun and a reverse type thing, but in the advent of ice, you could say this is we're going into the cold. This is the nuclear winter that we're entering. Um, the winter that is coming in George R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones.
Oh, absolutely, yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's the terminology. That's what like a lot of people I don't think realize. It's the fire and ice thing. Hell turning into Niflheim. Yeah.
oh yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Going back
Ice
into
and fire.
ice. Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, um, what's a good? Oh, Captain America, I think did it the best, right? So like we came out of the ice in World War II, right? That's when Captain America went into the ice, right? Got frozen. And we went into this whole like Cold War. Well, the Cold War goes on, that's like underground. So on the surface, everything's getting burned, right? So you have the revelation of baptism by fire is what's been happening. So now, in the advent of the ice raids, we're going back into the ice, which at this time was when, 70 years later is when Captain America gets dug out of the ice. Same with like the Transformers movies did the same shit where they dug the dinosaurs and multiple of the Decepticons and Optimus out of the ice in the north. The other dinosaur, Optimus Prime, they all had 70-year timers on them too, right? Which you have like a weak generation is 70 years, a strong generation is 80. So, and with ice, typically you're talking about weak because ice is brittle. So you're always doing the 70-year cycles with those. I think it's also just all these numbers play into each other so well. It's like it's amazing how the patterns line up where your perfect Jubilee is 7 sets of 7 years, which is 49, caps off
Yeah,
at 50.
the Yovel cycle of 7 Shemitah years, yeah.
Yep. Gives you your 50-year Jubilee. So, and then the other 20 to 30 years on top of that, your 2s and 3s, or like your 3-2-2, 2-3-3, skull and crossbones type shit. That's your other half of the generation. See, the whole thing is pieces of, I think, the 100-year or the 250-year cycles, right? Those are like the microcycles within these larger cycles that are like all constantly occurring. So you have, wheels within wheels within wheels that are constantly hitting each other at tangent points and aligning, right? When you have like these mass planetary alignments, yeah, the same things happen. When you say there's a planetary alignment that's happening on Saturday, April 17th or whatever, and we got a full moon and all that type of stuff, everything down here is aligned to that. Whether it's like the solar system and what happens down here is the same, or it's just a matter of people who exist down here and observe the stars align the shit going on down here with the stars, because that's like the galactic clock that everybody can see. It can't really be masked either, right? It can be contorted, it can be veiled, it can be masked in a sense of cloud cover, overcast, all this other nonsense, but ultimately everybody can at least see it every single night with a clear sky for most places in the world, right? So I mean, it's just kind of
well that ties in as well with what just happened on the 4th of March, right?
right.
We had the 3rd of March. What was that escalation in the US-Iran war on that day? God, that's
when the announcement I think was made. So it's not anything really happened. It was just
no, it was the Iris Dena. The Iris Dena, they sunk that Iranian warship. That was So and then you had the Blood Moon, right? That occurred then. So everything, and of course you had Purim that day as well. We won't go into that, but if you know,
it's part of all the same. It's wheels within wheels.
Exactly. Yeah.
Is
And what's interesting as well, just I was going to mention quickly there too, is so we see them now all in Israel hunkering down in these bunkers, right? Which is interesting. Interestingly, that's what's occurred during a lot of the various sort of exodus events. The diaspora would hide in caves and things such as that. But Isaiah 26:20, we read, quote, "Go, my people, enter your chambers and lock your doors behind you. Hide but a little moment until the fury passes," unquote. So this, the verse itself is sort of related in later Talmudic tractates and Zohar exegesis to the end of days, right? So it's and you were mentioning about the baptism by fire too, Regan. We read from Tosef, Tosefta, sorry, it's getting late here. Tosefta Ta'anit 2:11, where the sages discuss if a global flood can come upon the earth again, since God promised it would in Genesis 9:15. The sages qualify that statement. This is in the Zohar as well. but it reads, Rabbi Meir said, quote, a flood of water will not come again, but a flood of fire and brimstone will. We also read this is how the Mashiach will destroy Rome, vis-a-vis once all of the kings have converged upon Rome. And once, of course, the two kings in the north have fallen, I mean, we can make up our minds what he means by that, or what the Zohar means by that, but after that, the meteors will come down like arrows of fire and, basically eviscerate Western civilization. But like he brought upon the people of Sodom, as it is written, quote, and God rained upon Sodom and Gomorrah brimstone and fire, Genesis 19:24. Rabbi Yehuda said, a flood upon the whole world will not come again, but a flood upon individuals will, such as if a person is at sea and his ship sinks and he dies. This is like a personal flood. Rabbi Yose said, and of course in the Strait of Hormuz they're sinking loads of ships, a flood of water will not come again, but a flood of plague upon the idolaters in the days of Mashiach will. And in the Zohar it says that this plague will eat their flesh while they still stand, right? So, I mean, and then you read, so a similar statement is found in Midrash Shir Hashirim Rabbah 2:13, quote, the fig tree puts forth her green figs, Song of Songs 2:13, said Rabbi Chia bar Abba, before the days of the Messiah, a great plague will come to the world and the sinners will succumb to it, and the vines and blossom give forth their fragrance. These are the survivors of whom it is said, and it shall be that he that is left in Zion and he that remains in Jerusalem shall be called holy. Isaiah 4:3. So it makes you wonder, what were they pumping in the veins of all those people's, what was that, 4 years ago or something? Give or thereabouts, 4 or 5 years ago. I mean,
Still,
obviously,
still to this day.
still to this day, yeah, still to this day. Funny. See
Well,
when
I
I
wonder.
passed.
I wonder. Like, I'm sure plenty have gotten their injections throughout the years prior to that too. So, but those in 2020, are just more so. I would say at the very least, right?
Oh yeah,
Whatever the stuff is. So it's like, I'm sure everybody had a lot, but that was the turning point, right? Your mass flip or something. But who's really to say? Nobody really knows. And that's kind of the mass weapon about it, is that it's completely conflagrated. It's convoluted. Nobody knows what information to believe. Nobody, and that's like kind of the true flood of fire, is all information is now subject to being fallacy, no matter what it is, right? Can't trust your family members, can't trust the news, can't trust your government authority figures, can't trust video evidence, can't trust physical evidence, can be forged and faked. Everybody's in a total discordia.
yeah.
Just as we're speaking here on Discord. you know, I think that's the true flood of fire, or baptism of fire. He
Well,
burned the. Oh yeah, that was. I kept thinking of this quote all day. The Library of Alexandria gets burned down and rebuilt every day, and that's essentially what's happening on a mass scale. The Library of Alexandria is being burned down at an individual level, so that nobody has any basis. No one has any cultural background that they're rooted in anything. And like you're
that's
saying,
right.
like Israel and the group that calls themselves the Jews would be like one of the only ones, because they're the ones that exist in total discordia. They've been spread out amongst nations. They're, whoever claims to be a part of this group, they're all over the place, claiming to be a part of every other group that there is in existence, but secretively claiming, they're this messianic Zohar Zionist viewpoint, behind closed doors, essentially. So they're like the only unified group that actually appears like the most discombobulated, the most segregated, the most split up is actually the most unified, while the nations who appear completely unified and organized together are actually completely disconnected, have no cultural roots, no base origins to hold to, no communities, or very little, if not completely dysfunctional, if they do exist, by the one group that acts like they're completely dysfunctional and distorted across the nations.
Oh yeah,
Total and
absolutely, total. I mean, well, we read from Deuteronomy 7 verses 22 to 23, quote, "And the Lord your God will drive out the nations, the goyim, before you little by little. You will be unable to destroy them all at once, lest the beasts of the field become too numerous for you." This is speaking about the other nations. But the Lord your God
farmers.
will deliver. Yeah, but the Lord your God will deliver them over to you and will inflict defeat upon them. Oh no, pardon. See, this is an incorrect translation. Yeah, this is the New King James. It should actually read, "But the Lord your God will deliver them over to you by putting them into confusion until they're destroyed." You give them over to confusion. That's how it should read.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, couldn't have that out there because then it would sound too much like the current time. And if it read that way in the current time, people would actually be able to grasp at something.
Yeah, that's it. And will throw them into great confusion until they're destroyed. Yeah, exactly. So they've changed it. Yeah, because it'll sound too much like what we're going through. So yeah.
Too obvious. We
Too
can
old.
make it
That's
obvious, not that obvious.
exactly. Yeah. Yep.
You had
Um.
some deal. I saw you unmute and come back.
Yeah. Um, going back to that thing about the liminal and the rational, do you think that they have the edge over the Western mind, Silas, because of this insight into the liminal, as you say, like this? I don't know how you would describe it, like this shadowy realm of
Mhm.
stuff that doesn't make sense. Do you think that's an Achilles heel in the Western rational mind, like that, they can't account for, they can't deal with it, they don't know how to parry the blows
Oh no,
that come from.
if they can't measure it, it doesn't exist. So therefore, you basically get a society that you're living in, which is it's completely devoid of any culture, it's devoid of any destiny, and it speaks of complete and utter platitudes that are utterly meaningless and banal. And you see this in, by the way, see the idea of Boaz and Yakin and the middle head, the hidden pillar, right?
Mm.
The a bit like the conspiracy, it's hidden, right? You have the pillar of knowledge or the pillar of unity, is also another name for it. That, which is the
Yeah.
11th Sephra, the hidden Sephra. Effectively, that is that of Israel, of Jacob, of the seed of Jacob. That is the middle pillar. It's middle because it's between the right of Chesed, mercy, or of pure passion and spirituality, that of Ishmael, of Islam, and that of course, pardon me, that of course the cold intellect of Gevura, which is Boaz, which is the um, left hand, left side, and that is of the West, Rome. So, and what you're
Gavura.
seeing is Gevura, yeah, and so you're seeing a
Gevura.
mixture of Gevura, so it's Gevrah, Gevura, yeah, and so you're seeing the song of ice and fire essentially, and the one in the middle is the sort of um, it's the sort of chosen one, the one who bridges both the animal soul of the nefesh, Habe Hamit, which of course we all just have the animal souls. Supposedly, we're just of the nefesh Habe Hamit, but of course the Israelites have the nefesh Halokit, which is the sort of divine soul, literally the soul of God. Nefesh ha Elokit, from Elohim, right? Same
Mm,
Elohim, same root. So the idea is that they bridge the two. They bridge the supernal and the infernal, the left and the right, the cold intellect of reason and the passion. And in a way that is correct. I mean, absolutely. I mean, you can clearly see all of this has been weaponized. I mean, you've
yeah,
got Westerners that are running about saying, "Well, if I can't measure the soul in the body, it doesn't exist." You know,
yeah,
there was some comment. God, it was a wee while back, and he thought he was being very, very clever, right? As they do, these absolutely idiotic Westerners living at the end of history, where they're talking about. I think it was some individual. He was expressing something of a sort of, I guess, an esoteric spirituality sort of viewpoint on things, and he mentioned the soul, and the very clever reductionist and scientistic mind said, well, we've measured all of the body and we can't find the soul anywhere. It has no volume, it has no depth, and then
yeah,
well, you're to the point there. Then, well, how do you understand the cosmos? Because a great deal of the cosmos you can't actually fucking see. Pardon my French. So
yeah,
it's made up of what they theoretically call dark matter, right? Which what is
mm,
dark matter? Well, it's that thing you can't see, right? Which you know and also there's the presupposition from the coldness of intellect and reason, which is that I know everything. What I'm seeing is
yeah,
objective reality, which is not. We all live in our own minds. We are the
yeah,
subjects of reality. We have no direct control, direct interfacing with objective reality other than through the aperture of the subject of the mind. So
yeah.
um,
Like
it's just
j-
madness.
just just again to sort of try and this idea of the liminal and how
Yeah.
it's ostensibly outside the reach of the Western rational mind, and that it's something that, let's just say, right, that let's theorize or hypothetically say that within the Jewish kind of cultural mind or artistic mind, potentially they have a deeper insight into that liminal, uncanny, subliminal, the darker reaches of ether and kind of form and formless and unformed and yet to be formed, and how these forces impact us on a very deep, uh, they affect the dark matter of our own souls or the dark matter of our consciousness, and they know how to resonate and reverberate within us. And as to try and put things in plain English, like I'm thinking about the likes of the artwork, for example, of Man Ray, and how X-rays of scissors and razor blades and these strange kind of how they can make no sense at all. Yet when you're presented with it, with to behold it, it sort of impacts you on some deep level that you may not even know you have, or you might it's your own dark matter, your internal dark matter. So what I'm kind of trying to drive at in the question is, do you think that they have a much deeper insight into how these things work in us and how to, not just manipulate us, but that they themselves are more aware of, or they have the canniness of this sort of other side of things that has been shielded from the Western eyes. And as you use that word liminal or esoteric or arcane, or but somehow like they're primordial, older, deeper kind of actually natural forces that perhaps come from chaos, essentially, or they're more aligned with chaos than, say, rational construct and reason, and that somehow within like it was a narrative, for example, that came out of World War II, was this condemnation of, as it were, in inverted commas, Jewish art, and this basically came from National Socialism. And there's the infamous book burnings and demonization of what they called Jewish art. Actually, jazz music was ushered in there as well, even though jazz is an African American art form primarily. Like it is, well, for my money, it is the classical music of America, Miles Davis and such. But that's not to go on so much of an aside. But it is a little bit relational, because aspects of jazz in improvisation and in the complexity of it, and the kind of the intuitive interconnectivity within musicians, sort of dives into those realms, or is capable of diving into those realms and pulling stuff up from the depths. But similarly within the Jewish art, and it's such a crude terminology I'm using, but within some of the references, that what I'm trying to get, do you think there's potentially some sort of an insight, like a cultural insight there, that's contained maybe within maybe Judaism? Again, if you pardon the crude framing of the question, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for example, we have well, just to read this quote just really quickly, and then I'll talk about it. Zohar, Volume 1, Folio 15a, Parashat Bereshit. In the beginning, I quote, "At the very beginning, the king made engravings in the supernal purity." Um, by the way, the translation of this will change between translate. I believe this is the Pritzker edition. I've noted here. A spark of blackness emerged in the sealed within the sealed, from the mystery of the Ein Sof, the infinite, or literally the infinite light, the nothingness. A mist within matter, implanted in a ring, no color at all, not white, not black, not red, not yellow. So not the colors, of course, of the magnum opus. Only when he measured the measure did it yield radiant colors. The idea is that the mind of man has some degree of establishing or making manifest the potential of the emanation of creation, or the eminence of creation rather. So the idea is that the mind itself is the tool, right? The square and the compass by which we measure and form the world. So if you understand that, then it's not much of a leap of logic to realize, well, if the mind is the perceptual vehicle that controls the world and controls how we view the world, and thus how we view the world is how the world actually is, then it doesn't, you basically are getting to the idea, well, if we want to create this vision of a utopia within the world, if we want to create our own vision within the world, we're going to have to utilize en masse the psychic funneled energy of the masses, through, of course, like we mentioned, eschatological convergence, but we're going to have to use the perceptual vehicle en masse of the mind to establish this world, to project this world onto the sort of canvas of the liminal, right? I mean, there's I do think they have a better grasp of it, and the reasons for it is, firstly, I mean, just from the pure effects that we see. Pardon me, from the pure effectual, not factualness, pure cause and effect. Pardon, that you see in the world. We are at the bottom of the rung of the ladder. I mean, that is blatant. It goes without saying. They clearly rule, right? It's for example, the US is one nation under blackmail. The UK is one nation under blackmail as well, but unfortunately, it's not really a nation anymore. So it's just a group of crony politicians that are under blackmail at this point. But absolutely, they control it effectively at all, right? the Kabbalists do, the Zionists do. So their understanding must be so profound, must be so connective, and it must be so resolute and practical that they've managed to amass really what is the first empire in history that's managed to come about through purely intrigue, and it might be the first empire in history to span the entire globe. I mean, that's a feat that doesn't come about through pure military action. It's not a feat that comes about through, second guessing. It's not a feat that comes about through wishy-washy understanding, wishy-washy fables or metaphors of the world. It comes through pure practical knowledge. Of course, yes, dressed up in riddles, metaphors, parables, but these parables themselves are easily unpackable vis-a-vis the tools that they have, the keys that they have, if you will, the mental keys. And it speaks directly both to the subconscious, and it also imparts knowledge onto the conscious as well that's, again, applicable to the world around us. So, I mean, I can only go by, as we see it, the results. And the results are we are losing. Our culture is unsustainable. Our viewpoint, our metaphysics are completely, I mean, they just don't work. They don't work because you can see it in the world of cause and effect, So yeah, I think they have a better understanding of things. It's just, and I've been saying it for years now. I say that we have to actually look at what they're doing, study your enemy, if you will, to understand what they're doing to make themselves so successful, and then replicate it. I mean, I have to laugh. I always laugh now. Really, I'm past the point of being glum about the whole thing. I mean, if you've got to laugh or you'd cry, that idea, but a lot of the British here, you know, your neighbors won't even help you. You don't even you have no communities. Your neighbors don't even help you. You've got all of these, again, as I said, Yechidim running about, these solitary creatures, atomized entirely. And they're literally headless chicken. But the interesting thing is that they actually believe they're not headless chicken. They believe that they are the pinnacle of human development. We even see this in the sort of Western chauvinist sort of opinions of, as you would call it, quote unquote, the far right, right? So it's or even some of the more intellectual of the alt right and far right and what have you. I mean, the West is not unique. Well, it's unique in the sense that it's of pure reason. It's the pure machinery of reason and measurement, and that which cannot be measured must be, just reduced down to such a sort of hollow state of things. Such a sort of what would the word be? Sort of inauthentic image of it, a pure simulacra. For us to understand it. So things like God go, things like the soul. I mean, the idea that a society wouldn't even contemplate or have an idea of the soul, or not even an idea, but a fully, something that's taught within the educational establishments as a fact, right? If you don't have a soul, you don't live. You're not animate. They're saying, well, that's simply just electrical currents, right? So what you're getting to is this reduction of the human experience down to mere informational or sensory, a mere informational or sensory network of, sort of entangled pulsations and firings. So, I mean, of course, that's not the case. It could never be the case because human beings don't act on a binary system. We don't even act on an analog system. We're beyond that, you know. And the mind of humanity is more than mere. Its value lies in more than just merely informational processing. Humanity is the bridge between the transcendent and the purely earthly. And that is the true value of humanity. And if a civilization can't grasp that, then they're not long for this world. That's all I'll say. But that's my opinion upon it, you know. I do think they have a
I'm,
better grasp of things, yeah.
I'm looking at that. She was a Polish artist. Her name is Tamara de Lempicka, Limpicka. First name Tamara, Tamara. And I think she was a Polish Jewish artist, but she she painted in a kind of Art Deco style. But like, I don't know who originated the Art Deco style, but it's when I look at her paintings, I kind of think of. I just sent you one there, Silas. I don't know if I'm having trouble to post it in the notes, but I don't know if you can.
Yeah, it's sent 4 times.
Sorry, sorry about that.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's like it's the mindset around the concept for the art itself. How she was able to kind of go there, and how she was able to portray the mood and ambience and essence of that kind of spirit vibe in her paintings. Like there's almost like it's a sophistication, and it's sort of borderline hubris in there as well, but it's also like kind of quietly self-confident, but it's also sort of got this kind of deeper connection to something else, like that's greater than the actual some of the parts of the painting. Like the one painting I sent you there is a woman driving a car. It's very kind of like
Mm-hmm.
1920s chic kind of, but it's the whole mood of what she put in the expression on the woman's face is like a kind of a quiet, a kind of almost disdain, but more like a moody self-absorption, like, you know, and a kind of a oneness, a kind of togetherness within herself, within that central character. And it's like I'm trying to think or search for somewhere in the Western, maybe in surrealism, Salvador Dali, maybe that we can, you know, we have that kind of a sensibility. But I often think, and this is just pure, like, you know, this is just like a pure hunch, that somewhere in Judaism, somewhere is a connection to something else that essentially is not necessarily within the Western mind, or ironically, and perhaps that connection is something that was borrowed from an older Western culture. Like when I say older, I mean Thule,
Mm-hmm.
Atlantis, something like that.
Yeah.
Some older ancient culture where, you know, perhaps they had a deeper connection, and somewhere over the time it was lost. I know kind of Michael Sarian had spoken about that kind of idea that these were things that were migrated down into Judaism. Perhaps they were the eventual recipients of it, and as you point out, Silas, the Kabbalah, it's that which is received. So received from whom? Perhaps it was from an older human culture, or indeed from something, you know, from something above man, you know, from some sort of a god figure. But as you say, then, and it gets confusing, I have to admit for myself, that as you say, they don't necessarily believe in the god figure. So, you know, it's the
Well,
whole, yeah,
the idea of the Ayin is still there. You know, this nothingness,
yes,
the Ayin Sof. But that
mm,
itself isn't even a god. It's like what you heard there. When we were reading, it's this spark of blackness, you know? I mean,
mm,
these things can't really even be understood by Western man. It's
yeah. But I
And
have
you
to
you
say, I have
feel it as
something
well
jump.
from the
Sorry
training.
to butt in abruptly there, but something you said a second ago there just really hit me, and I think it's they have the edge. You kind of hinted at, look, they have the sort of upper hand with a lot of this stuff, and I think it's isn't that what you said? And I think it's actually, if that is what you said, or more or less that, it's very important to acknowledge that, you know,
Oh,
we as a fading
yeah,
people.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Sorry, man, I didn't mean to interject.
No, not at all. No, I'm a believer in interjection. I think conversations should have people jumping in across each other. I think it's an element of it is normal. But but what I'm trying to get at is, basically that we don't have the mechanical framework for dealing with this stuff, because we have no prior sort of framework to understand it at all. Any of this, any what's going on in the world around us, and the subject matter of our conversations over the last couple of years, that we're trying to understand it. But the wider social mind has no, as to put it bluntly, they don't teach this shit in school. Like, there's no manual, there's nowhere to kind of become aware of it as such.
I'd say thankfully, Zeal.
Yeah,
You know, I'd rather not have a plan or a manual or any other type of guide to go by,
yeah,
because that's where your true creative conscious comes from. It doesn't
yeah,
come from a book or stone tablets or
yeah,
some computer AI. It
yeah,
comes from man being put in what seems to be an impossible scenario
mm,
and
yeah,
not having that book. If you have the book, you're going to have that delay in your synapses and your thought
yeah,
process. You're going to die.
yeah,
So, that's why I'd much rather be in this position where, yeah, we just have groups and small collectives and highly intelligent minds all over the place dealing with the madness the best they can at individual levels. But when that crux comes to the forefront, push comes to shove, when you actually get to that bridge, all that creativeness, the conscious energy just boils right to the top. And it's like
yeah,
instant, you know? Like, I mean, and I think it can be proved at an individual level time and time again within like the standard classroom. And when you're given like, weekly assignments at any level, right? Middle school, high school, college, doesn't matter.
mm,
Ask people and like you're going to get the same answers 99% of the time. The people who spent like weeks working on the assignment, 20 minutes a day, every day, blah, 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 usually end up with B's and C's. Sometimes they fail. The people who get A's, I mean, yeah, there's like those like Silas. He'll put a lot of work into it, but there's a certain level of intellect that Silas is putting into it over that time period with a level of understanding that most don't have. So most people do, and like I'm this way. Like I do my best work in the crooks of the situation. My assignment's
yeah,
due tomorrow, but it was assigned 3 weeks ago. I'm going to do all of the work the night before.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
The 3 weeks leading up to it, I have other assignments that are due the next day. I'm doing those. I'm doing everything right at the moment's notice in the present moment. I don't plan things out 3 months ahead. And I think you would understand a little bit being in a similar field, on the
yeah,
safety side.
yeah,
Dude, how many projects go as planned? How many people hit their actual deadlines? Like the only people who hit their deadlines change their fucking plans.
yeah, 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 yeah,
You
yeah,
know, they
yeah,
just move the goalpost, and then at the end of it, it's like the participation awards is what it's more like to me. Or
yeah,
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 we hit all our goals 100%, blah 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 blah, and it's like no, we didn't. If we go pull up the old reports over there, we didn't hit a single goal. We just changed them. You know,
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
when you have hundreds of people all trying to work together, or especially thousands, trying to like work at these mass corporations to build data centers, to build even on the construction sites, Silas, right? With all the
Mhm.
mass projects and trying to put all these people together. And even if you didn't have incompetent people at all the positions we're dealing with now, you're still going to have a high level of incompetency with just all the interactions and miscommunications, even with people who are highly intelligent, communicative, understanding, agreeable. You still have, discord and discourse and problems. And, it's just a different magnitude. It really is
Well,
that much difference.
it's the communication as well. I mean, you go on some sites now, you might have 2 or 3 languages that are spoken, so
Ooh.
it's
Yeah,
very
that's
unsafe. But you also have the issue of, I mean, that actually ties us back into the sort of foreignness of the idea of the concept of Ayin, to the Western mind, which is the way we view it is very Faustian. It's like, for example, we bring, even though it's a health and safety hazard, to bring people onto a site that don't have a certain level of English or don't speak English at all, and you're catering to their lack of English, right? Their lack of proficiency in English. And of course, I mean, what if something's falling? How the hell can they get my attention? Were they just going to scream like some sort of banshee? uh, you know. So, and hopefully you turn around and you understand what they're trying to tell you, and Anyway, so um, this is it. It's basically the idea of inclusivity, which is we can't have any exclusivity or exclusiveness, which because that would create boundaries, and we're trying to create this infinite nothingness, but they're not quite understanding what it is. Another one is, of course, diversity is our strength. Same idea, right? We will divide everything up. Everything shall be this sort of boundaryless, uh, wasteland of just pure potentiality, right? Undifferentiated, unbounded by demarcations here, there, and or anywhere. So, but again, that's not what the Ayin is actually about, right? It's, in fact, I just posted a few things there, Zeal. I mean,
Yeah.
you see, that's a purely Western Baroque style, sort of style of art, right? And then
Yeah.
above, you see the art, of course, Tamara de Limpica's auto portrait and this sort of Art Deco style. Now, don't get me wrong, the Art Deco is very Western influenced, but you'll notice there's like a the Ayin is literally written. You can actually feel it written into the portrait, and that the both of those portraits, which is this. It's it it's all with the Baroque style of the West. It it's firstly it's completely uh, sort of what would the word be, bedazzled or entranced by the idea of the heroic ego, right? Um, so you have the everything has to be like the Achilles, if you will. In fact, even modern individualism is based around this sort of Achilles uh, tendency, this heroic tendency, right? The main character syndrome is basically the shadow version of the heroic ego. And it's this sort of, that which is defined by an assertion of one's will, right? The hero conquers nature, he slays the monster, he achieves immortality, he goes through the 12 labors, right? He forces his name to be spoken by all generations that descend from him. His image will be, cast in gold, so on and so forth, right? And it's also an art of boundaries. It's an art that's deeply representational. This is something Eros was talking about. This relates to subjectivity, right? We are purely of the subjective. We're purely of the representational. We're purely of the boundaries. So we demand the divine, but we demand the divine in a way that's of pure beauty, that's of hopefulness, that is of pure order, pure yesh or form. However, with Judaism, you see it actually with the art of, especially that first portrait, you see this converse Jewish paradigm, which is that their art is one of chaos that they utilize to almost form an order, an order that they realize is temporary. You see this in Yahweh, by the way. Yahweh is in the chaos camp, the struggle against chaos, where all the other deities were purely of order, and they fought against the chaos. Yahweh was of chaos, and he utilized the chaos to actually establish order. So these are the distinctions. And then you see as well, it is what they're showing to you in these paintings, Tamara de Lampica, and there's other Jewish artists. Another one, of course, is like what you were saying, the Man Ray, right? There's a few others. They are actually showing you the ultimate reality of God, which is not just beauty, it's also the ugliness. It's everything contained in a sort of form of a singularity, not the singularity itself, but an image, a breath of the singularity, right? The Ayin Sof, the infinite. And because God cannot, of course, possess boundaries and is infinite, he doesn't necessarily have a body or a form, and this is why you see a lot of the when Judaism became more involved in art and culture and developing it or subverting it, depending on your opinion. You see it actually in the first one, the woman in the green Bugatti. Behind her, what is going on? There's like pure formlessness, right? Even her hand isn't. It's completely out of what would the word be? It's out of proportion from the rest of her body. The car is out of proportion from the rest of her body. The angles don't work out. It's this sort of nightmarish, yet deeply entrancing. It's like the black sun, right? It's this thing which is of light, but it's not necessarily of light entirely. It's a sort of eeriness, and this is what this is the highest state of reality. This is the Ayin, and unfortunately, like what we see in the West, like Nietzsche, those of the West who try to get close to the Ayin, they go into madness and they eventually unalive themselves because they don't understand. You can't measure the thing, and for the Western mind, I don't think it can. They can't comprehend it, and it just leads them to an epiphany, a realization that in fact, I won't describe the realization, but it brings them to a realization that the world isn't as heroic. It's not as cut and dry as we're led to believe. That beneath the foreground, the facile foreground, there are workings at play that go beyond even human comprehension. And you have to have the humility, and dare I say, you have to have the sort of mental tenacity to be able to comprehend the thing without it devouring you. You know.
I give you. I just
So
read
yeah,
a couple of lines, just basically exactly on what you're talking about there. Talking about something that's essentially incomprehensible, and talking about something that would essentially send you into, madness, and as you say, potentially unalive yourself if you were able to grasp the true sort of angular, beetling, sable depths of the abyss, like. and how that has this. Just I'll read you a few lines here from this is from T.S. Eliot, and this is from The Wasteland, and Eliot wrote this in 1922 at the same time that James Joyce wrote Ulysses, and Joyce had been to Paris in the earlier part of the 20th century, and before he went to Paris, right, his narrative style in his novels was linear, was regular, rational, linear. John came into the room and he had a chat with Mary, and you can read it as ordinary linear text, one thing happening after the other, and one character speaks, then another character speaks. But then he went to Paris, and when he came back from Paris, he wrote Ulysses, essentially. This is my understanding. And the narrative style in Ulysses is Ayin Soph. He completely abandoned his old linear style, and he began to write in this what is probably correctly called modernism, but I would describe it as postmodernism or post-structuralism, because he used a non-linear way of writing. And if you ever read Ulysses, even if you can read a few pages of it, you'll be like, what the
Mm-hmm.
like, it takes quite a few reads, and people have read it for years, and it's acclaimed. It's the greatest novel ever written, in inverted commas. And Joyce himself actually said, it was written about sort of the history or the story of two peoples, the Irish and the Jews, who he said were sort of interconnected. And he was exploring, because the main character in Ulysses, Harold Bloom, is a Jewish. He's Jewish, and he's walking around Dublin. I think the novel takes over the course of one day. But I remember, I knew nothing about any of this, and found myself back in university back in the day, and in an English literature class, and this guy said, right, we're going to do Ulysses. I'd never heard of it, and I was like, what and then trying to read this thing, and I was like, oh my god, man. If you were on acid and mushrooms, and you probably have a better chance of making sense of it. But you can make sense of it, obviously, but it's a very acquired, you need to sit there and absorb it, and the first few times you read it, you won't necessarily grab it, and then you begin to get the flow of it. He could be writing a paragraph where the character is having an internal monologue, and that's not really making any sense, and the character, for example, might make references to things that happened in his past in one paragraph, and then in his future, and then in his present, and then in the middle of it all, he might break into um, quoting an advertising slogan about, plum trees, potted meat, or something random inside in the middle of the paragraph. And you're kind of hanging on for dear life reading this, going, where is this stuff going? But it's coming from this, Ayin Soph, as you're saying, from this deeper thing. But I have a pet theory that when Joyce went to Paris, he met with these people, these what's our friend's name? The cursed chair, and
Oh, Bataille.
Bataille, and
Yeah.
not directly with them, but he met with the circle of thinkers that supported this kind of movement. But similarly, in the same year, T.S. Eliot wrote The Wasteland, a famous poem, and Eliot also employs a similar technique in The Wasteland. And I think actually what Joyce and Eliot did was, this was a weaponized attack on the output of some of the paintings you posted there are sort of traditional classical European art, and I think around after World War I, the powers that be essentially wanted to destroy the traditional artifacts of the novel and the poem, as they were artifacts of culture, of Western culture. So I have a pet theory that they felt, well, if we can destroy what is a poem, like Ode to a Grecian Urn, a typical romantic kind, and just break it into pieces and come up with this disintegrated, fragmented, uh, schizophrenic, psychotic kind of um, tapestry of bits and pieces of existential blitz, it will give a better reflection of where people are moving through the 20th century. And when they look, well, where is the high art of my culture? That we'll present them with the likes of this novel and this poem, and we'll say, this is who you are as a people. This is the highest artistic reflection of who you are as a people. And somewhat interesting, Joyce, for example, on a conspiracy theorist front, was Jesuit educated. So there's a little clue on him, and a little clue on T.S. Eliot's poem. It was heavily edited by, and I'm going to have to pause because I can't think of the guy's name off the top of my head, but Silas might be able to drag up his name there if you're on the blower there, Silas. The guy who edited T.S. Eliot's poem originally was much, much, much longer, but it was edited and put together by a guy who was a good friend of William Butler Yeats, and this guy was also a member of the Golden Dawn. So they were essentially, in layman's terms, they were sort of Masonic, Kabbalistic, probably Theosophists as well, and they were essentially tied in with essentially the power structure. But anyway, let me give you a flavour of T.S. Eliot's poem. Silas, you might drag, if you can see if you can drag it up there. So in the bit I'm going to read you, I just quickly read you this.
The primary editor was Ezra Pound, was it not?
Ezra Pound, that's the man.
That was it. Yeah.
So he was connected in with Yeats, and so it hints at meddling. And we had this thing previously, Shakespeare being the product of Francis Bacon and a number, like a construct. And here we have potentially, again, we have this cultural output is essentially perhaps a construct of these people. Like, so let me quickly read this. What are the roots that clutch what branches grow out of this stony rubbish? Son of man, you cannot say or guess, for you know only a heap of broken images where the sun beats, and the dead tree gives no shelter, the cricket no relief, and the dry stone no sound of water. Only there is shadow under this red rock. Come in under the shadow of this red rock, and I will show you something different from either your shadow at morning striding behind you, or your shadow at evening rising to meet you. I will show you fear in a handful of dust. So there he's talking about like the Son of Man, and what are the roots that grow, and he's telling the Son of Man, you cannot say or guess, because all you know really are a heap of broken images where the sun beats. So he's kind of not insulting, but he's undermining the consciousness of man, really. And he's saying, you haven't a clue, like, if you want to take the line, you don't know the Ayin Sof.
That's actually straight from the Zohar. Funnily enough. Well, yeah, pretty much. Quote, this is Zohar, Volume 2, 42b, Parashat Bo. Quote, woe to him who compares him to any attribute, even to one of his own attributes, much less to human beings, whose foundation is in the dust solely. For the Ein Sof has no shape and no form, and there is no vessel to contain him and no means to grasp him. So it's pretty much that idea of the dust. That's extreme. I mean, that's all Kabbalistic imagery.
Have you ever come across the Red Rock? He mentions the Red Rock. Does that ring a bell?
Funnily enough, the Red Rock is actually, if you look in the Strait of Hormuz, well, of course, the Red Rock is Adama, which is quite literally the son of the Red Earth. That's the etymological meaning of it. But if you look on the Strait of Hormuz, Hormuz itself, Ormuz is from the Zoroastrian. It's an epithet for Ahura Mazda, or it's another name for him. The Lord of Light, the Lord of Wisdom, and on his mythological island, which is of course also theophorically named after him, called Hormuz Island, it's actually made of red earth as well. So I only bring that up because, of course, of what's going on with the US and Iran. But effectively the red earth is the blood, and it's and the idea in the Zohar is that blood is the coagulation of light, right? And so the coagulation of light itself with the red earth would be, I guess, that coagulation of light mixed with the coagulation of decomposition, which then you add water to it, which is itself the mirror between the above and the below, and also contains the divine feminine, the first he of Yod He Vahe. And then, of course, you add fire to that, the primal fire, the animate soul, if you will. That's and then, of course, you dry it in the air, in the sun, or just in the air itself, the ambience. Then, of course, you will form the vessel, the sephira, and then that forms the second hay, and then that, of course, acts as the sort of the urn for the libation from the supernal regions, you know. So the idea is that basically everything you're seeing with that red earth concept is it's to do with blood, it's to do with sacrifice, it's to do with decomposition. It's actually it's basically that we are the almost like the narrative vessel of God itself, you know, in a way.
Let me kind of ask you a question, right? And I'll put it in like a kind of hypothetical way, right? Like, let's just say it's like a Twilight Zone episode, right? And there's people like you and me, Regan, people who may be even listening into this conversation at some point, and we're talking about the way things are in the world and the way this power structure works, and you know how they made their understanding of the Ayin Sof and these things. And eventually, we get to a point where we either decide to rebel. These people in this TV program, or maybe people like us, we decide to rebel, or it comes to a point where we realize that actually our existential survival insists that we ourselves must learn how these things work, if you will. So, do you think that there's any strange kind of inevitability or potential inevitability that we ourselves would find ourselves somehow in the mix of all these things and potentially becoming sorcerers as well, like in some way, or to some degree, greater or lesser, but that, as it were, we would don the cloak of our captors and masters and the sorcerers who are kind of weaving in around us, that we ourselves would don those cloaks and learn to dance the dance that they dance, and learn how they speak and learn how they use the number and the word. Do you think there some sort of you know, like, if we hang around this street corner long enough watching this stuff going on, are we ourselves going to get kind of somehow tied into it? Like,
We will. Well, let me preface what I'm about to say. For example, Joyce and Eliot, right?
mm,
And I read Ulysses long ago. In fact, before I knew any of this stuff. But and it just came across as I've got to be honest,
bollocks.
arbitrary nonsense. Yeah, it makes far more sense now when you look at it in hindsight with these understandings.
Yeah,
And I'll talk a bit about them. But it's what Joyce and Eliot I think were doing is they
yeah,
fundamentally they were tools of subversion, but I think they were unwitting tools of subversion.
right, right.
I think they had this idea that, like what we just came to, the conclusions of the West themselves, they are their view on the liminal, their view on metaphysics, it's wrong. We have to change it. But unfortunately, Joyce and Eliot, when they produced this work, again, if you're producing this work, if you're putting this out into the Western psyche, they have
Yeah.
no reference point for any of this. So it just
Yeah.
comes across as subversion, right? They're
Yeah.
dabbling,
Yeah.
they're looking through the darkly lit glass to
Yeah.
the black light, and they're just looking at it, and they're becoming completely perturbed and demoralized by it, and they don't understand it, of course, because they have no reference point, unlike, of course, Judaism. And
Yes.
I mean, Joyce's work, Ulysses, is essentially the deeper sub narrative of it is this: it is a subversion purely of Odysseus, of Homer's Odyssey. You
Yes.
know, it's and the way that he writes as well. You know, it is very Ayin. It's this idea that every conscious reverie that we have is merely just a temporary spark, a spark from the blackness that emerges from that sort of deeper wellspring of nothingness. So this
Yeah.
is why it almost feels as though it's just it's like gone in the wind. You know, it's just this fleeting thing. Ulysses is. I mean, I can't even remember Ulysses. That's how fleeting it was, and how
Do you think
sort of.
it was a bit contrived, or
No,
do you think it has?
I think that's how it is contrived, because of course Joyce is writing from a non-Jewish point of view about a concept that is deeply. I mean, there's no sort of antecedent inspiration for that within his own culture, other than of course perhaps Druidism, but that was
Yeah.
wiped out, you know, thousands of years ago, right? So, I think they were trying to recapture it, but the problem is when you're trying to recapture that on a civilizational wide level, it just doesn't work, because you're dealing with the vast majority of civilization that don't even have a reference point for that conceptualization
Mm.
of that that metaphysical concept. So and so what you see with Bloom going is basically Bloom just going about London,
Dublin.
Dublin.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he's drifting through it. Again, a bit like you know these sparks that are emerging from nothingness, right? The fleeting thoughts of oneself, and
Mm.
you notice through the work as well. He's got like this intense passivity, right? Where, of
Mm.
course, the Odysseus character that I think, of course, Joyce was attempting to subvert.
Mm.
Odysseus is almost like this. Well, for example, we see Bloom's wife. Bloom's wife, if I recall correctly, is having an affair. I forget the character's name. She's
Yeah.
having an
Molly.
affair with Molly Bloom. Yes, she's having an affair. Is a God, I forget the character's name,
Oh,
but
it'll come to me.
yeah, but he again, Odysseus, I believe, went through a similar thing when he returned, and he burst in and he slew the suitor, right,
Yeah.
of his wife. But Bloom doesn't. Bloom actually just almost accepts it. He
Yeah.
observes it. I mean, there's even a sort of sense of forgiveness,
Yeah.
or
Yeah. Yeah.
it goes beyond just passive acceptance. This itself is a Kabbalistic concept known as bitul. And
Right.
bitul is quite literally self-nullification. It is
Right.
to become the void, right? Or it's to
Yeah.
trying to engender the void in oneself so that you can, of course, control the chaos to create the
Jesus.
order.
Now
These
that you
these
mentioned that,
ideas.
be told. Sorry, it's be told. You said, is it?
Yeah, the
I
Beatles.
remember a Steiner lecture, and he was, sorry to jump sideways here, but he was talking about the preparation for the function of Freemasonry and the function of Theosophy, and he was on about getting yourself into this kind of higher state and how to do it, and he was giving these tips, and one of the things he said was like this: be told. He said, was, to have the same point of view, no matter if something great was happening to you or something terrible was happening to you, that you'd essentially greet everything with the same stoic, nonchalant, divorced, cold stoniness. And when I was listening to him saying this, that sounds very like anti-human. Like he's trying to make people into machines. He's trying to, but it sounds like that he was kind of promoting what you were talking about there, this self-nullification. Or maybe, maybe, I don't know, maybe is it like maybe a Buddhist thing as well? I'm not sure.
Oh, absolutely is. Yeah, it's the disillusion. But the thing is with Judaism, they don't just go into the disillusion. I mean, one way to look at it is almost the Western psyche would say, for example, right, look at this beautiful, marvelous, magnificent form, right? In it, we conquer the void.
Yeah.
Conversely, Kabbalah, or just Judaism in general, they would say, look past that form, that beauty, what you see on the sort of facile
Yeah.
veneer, even if it titillates the senses, because that is where the void is, and that is where infinity actually resides, and that's where infinite power resides,
Yeah.
right? So that's the way they view it, and I can imagine Freemasonry probably at certain degrees views it in a similar light. I know Morals and Dogma. Albert Pike definitely conveyed that through what was it, 700 odd pages. I mean, he is purely on board with Kabbalah, and
Yeah.
even the way he writes as well is very. It's like he's got himself into that state of mind. I mean, funnily enough, I have to be honest. When I was writing the first, second, probably most of my books, bar the last one, I was sort of in that state of mind as well, where I was neither here nor there. I was right. I was writing, but there was a monologue going on in my mind that my conscious mind wasn't necessarily privy to. It's hard to describe, but you're not necessarily in a self nullification. It's not. It's even beyond slightly a flow state. You're sort of in this state where nothing is necessarily perturbing you. Your
Yeah.
flow isn't being disturbed in any sort of adverse way.
Yeah.
You're sort of tapping into another part of your psyche. But fundamentally,
Yeah.
the Ayin itself, what we have to remember, this isn't something external to us. These concepts aren't external to us. They are a part of us.
Oh, okay.
So it's because everything is seen through the subjective lens, we can't necessarily engage with objective reality. And the closest we can get to that is this sort of understanding of the Ayin. But it's not really even a grasp or a full understanding. It's merely
Yeah.
it's a sort of a tentative simulacra or mimicry or something like that. It's not the full thing.
But yet,
But yeah, I
yet
think they're
you
doing that.
don't,
Yeah.
you can't consciously understand it, but you sort of empathetically can connect into it, and in a way you understand it like deeply, insofar as like almost subconsciously you like, if it's within you, you can connect to it in a sense. Would you agree with that, or?
Yes, you're basically given form to the void
Yeah.
in so much as it provides you power within the material realm in which you reside. And I think that's the only. I mean, you see it, for example, back to Ulysses, right, in Bloom.
Yeah.
You're seeing it because he's embracing this liminality, but he's doing it in. I mean, even his identity, right? He's Jewish, but
Mhm.
there's all. If I recall correctly, he's not accepted. he speaks in a sort of wistful way about being Irish, but
Yeah.
he's not accepted by the Irish. He's not necessarily
Yeah.
accepted by the Jews either, if I do recall. So it's, again, you see the liminality there. There's a Hebraic term for this, and I'm going to have to go into my notes. There we go. Yes, right. So there's actually a Hebraic term for this concept. Again, these concepts can't really even be understood, and we don't have words for them. Interestingly, in the West, the closest you would get to is like a twilight space, like neither here nor there, or things like that. But they have a term for it. It's Bain ha shema shot, which quite literally, it's, I mean, liminality is one way. Embracing liminality, embracing the void, and so they have terminology for all of these concepts. We can't even quite, like, for example, when we're speaking about these things, all of us, we're having to go through our vocabulary and
Yeah.
try and pick out compounds of words, because we
Yeah.
don't have words for these concepts. They have words for these hashemashot, that literally this sort of idea of merging with the void, this twilight
Yeah.
space between this world and the void.
Yeah.
You're neither one thing nor the other. This also ties in as well to the shapeshifting, this concept
Yes.
where they can literally merge with any group known to man, and they become one with them, but they don't become one with them at the same time, because they've embraced liminality, they've embraced the void. They're
Yeah.
just their metaphysics just. The problem is we're too naive. You can actually see it in our art.
Yeah.
We
Blue-eyed.
basically blue-eyed, exactly, bingo. We just view nature, and we view beauty, and we view this
Yeah.
this sort of romanticized idea that at the end of the road there is a light, and we will,
Yeah.
and look at the beauty of nature. Nature is this beautiful thing, and we don't we don't go beyond the superficial view of things. So we don't necessarily. A lot of us, and you see it with the modern West, we don't actually understand that, that you can't, for example, apply morality to a predatory big cat, right? But many
Yeah.
people have done it, and they've tried, and I'm
Yeah.
sure they've failed. The conservationists and the environmentalists, and I mean, there were there's several instances of this, which is that the Western mind doesn't understand the full nightmarishness of nature.
Yeah.
It,
Tiger, tiger, burning bright
yeah,
in the forest of the night. It's the William Blake line.
yeah,
Something like, what hand frames your fearful symmetry? Something like that. And there was some reference, actually, I think by T.S. Eliot, by our friend there, T.S. Eliot, that to the Blake, that Blake poem. I think it was through him anyway. But he was trying to. I think the comment anyway, which is the point of what I'm trying to make, is Blake understood or was looking into that aspect of nature, that predatory. Like, what hand made the tiger? Do you know what I mean? As you say there, like, the hand of God made the jaws of the tiger that would rip flesh, and
yeah.
you know. So they're stark meditations, really, when you think of it, like,
Oh, they are, yeah. But
And,
here's the thing:
yeah.
oh no, jump in, man. Sorry.
No. Just go ahead. Go ahead.
Really quickly, just look at the way that we view, like most people view God. They view God as this purely nice character that's loving and kind and merciful. Even when God in the Old Testament, or even the New Testament, is outrightly projecting this sort of evilness or this contradictory nature. And in the Western mind, they open the Bible and they go, look at all of these contradictions. It makes no sense. You know, well, it's not meant to make sense. It's because you're not actually dealing with the God of the Western mind. You're dealing with God of the Semitic mind, which is this Ayin character. It's neither here nor there. You know, it exists in a twilight of space. Sorry, man.
No, no, not at all, not at all. Excuse me. And you know, you can apply, like, if you have this sensibility of, that's just the Ein Sof, or the liminal, or the uncanny, or the outer reaches of that's which is beyond reason and rationality. Like, you can see how potentially you could apply that to the battlefield, like to a military scenario where you had to deploy troops, or you had to strategize, or you had to fool your enemy, or you had to you know, if that was informing your kind of how you put your plan together, and you could apply what I'm talking about to the current world stage, where by the looks of it, and I'm saying that by the looks of it, we have, you know, the American superpower attacking Iran with in cohorts with Israel, and that's what it looks like. But what's the abstract um, artifact of that, which may be the real? Like, where is the real in this sense? You know, what can be extrapolated in what's in around the corner, or what's in the black box? You know, what machinations are actually at play? So it's kind of these things, like, and it's almost a dangerous way to look at things in a sense, because once you flip the thing from white to black, it can be very difficult to go back, and you may reach a point where you can't see white for black. You know what I mean? Once you flip your consciousness around to understand things in that way. So, and I think that's kind of where they're at a little bit, because you mentioned earlier on that they have the knowledge of both, you know, the white and black, the Ein Sof, and the rational. But I think it's potentially, maybe it's like, I don't know, but I put it to you, that is that possible for a human mind to have that fundamental grasp of both, of the creator that made the jaws of the tiger, and he also made the baby in the cot. You know, he made the serial killer, and he made the doctor that saved thousands of lives, you know, or whatever. You know, he's made the good and the evil, like, you know. But can the human mind, like, truly get in there, or does it send one into a kind of an insanity or a madness? And maybe that's where they are. Maybe they cross the that line into insanity, into a kind of a rational insanity, if you will, or a high functioning insanity. Like, what do you think?
Well, I know myself. I've never been the same since looking into this stuff. My
Yeah,
mind is my romanticism is completely gone. I mean, I'll
yeah.
never write along those lines again. You know, it comes back here and there in dribs and drabs.
What?
But
Are you
the
saying no love in your heart?
no, I mean more like it's that sort of west. Again, it's the westernized thing where you look at nature, you look at the land, and don't get me wrong, I still have a love for the land, but it's, see, when you've dabbled in this, when you've stared into the abyss long enough, if you will. I mean, the
Yeah.
thing eventually will stare back at you, you know, and
There's into you.
it stares into you exactly. But I mean, from you mentioned the military point of view. I actually wrote some little notes on this a wee while back, because it was something that crossed my mind as well. Just, you know, how would this sort of Kabbalistic these ideas, how would they, um, you know, how would they translate to the military? And I I looked at sort of like espionage is the primary one. So I mean, firstly, the idea of the liminality effectively creates and the Ayin, it creates the basis of the doctrine of asymmetric warfare, and it is the
Yeah.
highest form of asymmetric warfare. So the problem with the West, and it's not just the West, actually, East Asia has a similar issue. In fact, that guy, Predictive History, he said he did a video on Ulysses Joyce, but he said, I could tell you everything about what Dante was talking about, all of this, but when we get to James Joyce, I have absolutely no idea. Because he has no idea, because he comes from China, and their culture is purely based. It's almost like a hyper form of what the West is going through in terms of this sort of cold intellect. And the West loves geometry, it loves measurement, and it can't deal with asymmetric warfare. It's not even asymmetric warfare on a battlefield in terms of insurgency. We're talking about the asymmetric warfare that is totalizing, that hits them from cultural, social, economic
Yeah.
grounds. I mean, they just can't deal with it. They can't deal with it because fundamentally, they can only fight things that have shape to it. If the thing doesn't have any shape, then it's difficult for them to sort of grasp it. They're a bit like an NPC out of Skyrim, right? When you go into sneak mode and then you go out of sneak mode, they see you, and then you go back to sneak mode and you break the AI, right? And they're like, where did they go? Where did they go? You know, a bit like that. So it's they're very one track focused. But one example is the spy, right? Remember, if you're in this state of Batul or self nullification, the liminality, you're effectively the perfect intelligence operative, right? You like the James Bond archetype in a way, right? You're the 007, the two balls and a cane, right? Two ball cane.
Yeah.
You're the true spy that's become because you've become the empty vessel, right?
Third leg.
So exactly, yes. So yeah. I mean, you've effectively eliminated all boundaries, and you become the perfect mirror of your environment. So you can infiltrate anywhere at any time easily.
Mhm. Mm.
Because you're not imposing your will into the environment in which you infiltrate. So
Mhm.
so therefore you're never detected. You actually become the room, right? So I mean, you can also look at the ideas that I wrote here regarding psyops and the OODA loop, which is it's a concept created by a military strategist out of the US, John Boyd. I believe he's American. It might be English. I'm not sure. I forget now. But the OODA loop is observe, orient, decide, act, right? And it dictates how a commander processes reality. Um, if you can inject a lot of chaotic, contradictory data into the enemy's
Yeah.
system, their
Yeah.
literally their cognition just breaks down. So this observe, orient, decide, act, this loop just breaks down. So again, it's psychological operations, psyops, informational warfare. So the ultimate goal of psychological warfare, psyops, cyber warfare, and deception operations, informational operations, is not to destroy the enemy's tanks, their military assets. It's to actually destroy their very epistemology. So how do they know what they know, right?
Yeah.
So you overwhelm, you can do this by overwhelming their radar. This is through conventional means, feeding them contradictory intelligence and striking in illogical patterns. Through this, you shatter their conceptual framework. And then the enemy's command structure then collapses, not from necessarily physical destruction, but from the inability to process the reality you have thus imposed upon them. So because you are, again, like the chameleon, that can take on many colors, take on many forms, you become quite literally a psyop specialist. You know, you merely have to, again, you can feed them contradictory and subversive information. You can even be exposed to that subversion yourself, which might be quite effective. It might be quite enticing, subversion. But you, because you are in this Balul state, or be it buying Shimashot, this liminality, you don't become affected by it. It won't destroy, it won't sort of, hit back at you and destroy you, the subversion, right? Or decadence or decay or what have you. So you become the literal agent of social decay for your enemies, without actually poisoning yourself. I mean, it's just, I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The West can't compete with that. Neither, actually, to be honest, out of them all, the West probably has the best chance of competing with that and gaining an understanding of that, and of course, sort of reverse engineering it. But you know, the rest of the world, I mean, China is a prime example. They are just their culture is just not geared towards that. It's even worse than the West in terms of their, their sort of mechanistic thinking. So I just I don't see how. Yeah, I think honestly the Kabbalists will trump most nations in the world. They already have, I think.
That's why something popped into my head about the kind of power that you're talking about, that capacity to, sort of blend in and not get caught and infiltrate and disappear and kind of be impenetrable. Like, as you said, to China, the Chinese minds can't, like, we're severely hampered, but they're, doomed, sort of thing. They're completely subservient to it, like, and will welcome it. Actually, they'll welcome the chance to be its slaves, like, kind of thing. But I remember, along the lines of what we're talking about, that kind of power, Herbie Hancock was the piano player with Miles Davis, the jazz trumpet musician, and Miles Davis was like a real leading light in jazz in America, pretty much all through the latter part of the 20th century. But they were asking Herbie Hancock what it was like to play with him. A lot of people really looked up to him. He was a real figurehead in jazz, and he was like like a god figure, like in music. And Herbie Hancock said, one time we were playing, like they were playing in some theater somewhere, I think, some big concert, and it was like Carnegie Hall or something like that. And the place was full, and everyone was watching them play, and there was like a quintet, and they were all like they played telepathically. They were like telepathic. They would, the head of the start of the tune would be a head that everyone would recognize and agree on, and it would be a written head, like a chorus. And then once they'd done that, they'd just go off on one. They'd go off on one, and they'd have this telepathic interplay between each other, and it was really magical stuff. And then come back to the head, etc. Anyway, long story short, Herbie Hancock said somewhere in the middle of the tune, he just hit this chord out of nowhere on the piano. Herbie Hancock did, the piano player, and it was the wrong chord. Like, it was wrong, and he was like, "Oh fuck!" Like, he just made a total kibosh of the thing right in the middle of the tune. But without missing a beat, Miles Davis hit a note on the trumpet in a certain scale that just took that wrong chord and made it right. And he did that instantaneously. So he took a literal mistake, and by virtue of applying like the scale in a kind of he made it sound like kind of like a key change, and it was incorporated, and it worked. It was like, oh my god, what? And he just pulled it literally out of the ether. But that's that kind of, like, that dark Ayin stuff like that you're talking about. It also, I think, is connected into the flow state. What you hear these sports people talking about the flow state, like Ronnie O'Sullivan. what do they call that in snooker? Is it a 1-8-7 or what do they call that? Where they get all you knock every single ball down in the first, you know, at the start of the game. Ronnie O'Sullivan walks up to the snooker table and he pots the first ball, he pots another ball, and he just keeps going and going and going, and the other guy doesn't even get up to the table. And you're watching Ronnie O'Sullivan going around the table, and you're going, "Oh my god!" Like, I know nothing about snooker, but I was watching him moving, and I could say this dude is like Keanu Reeves in The Matrix. You know, when he puts his two arms out and the walls bend, like he's got the key into nature. Like, he's just connected in. So I think it works in that way as well. You know, there's a sort of a deep connection to a thing, and that's what I think a lot of what we're seeing around. I think they're kind of jamming, they're kind of improvising, and they're jamming, or they're being creative with what's happening around us. There seems to be some aspect of that to me, anyway. That it's art. It's an actual art. Maybe the art of all arts is this control to move, to turn the wheel. You know, is the greatest art, because it's the art of God, really, that they've and it's also the great anti-art, because it is the great subversion at the same time. You know, so I think that's kind of what they're flirting with, like, you know, beating the stone and getting sparks out of it and making a great fire. Like, it's really, you know, it has that kind of vibe.
Oh, absolutely. And it's even. I mean, it's almost. There's more to it, of course. I mean, there's more of an antinomian sense, especially in the modern day. I mean, it goes in, of course, as you saw in the Epstein files. They go into things like jerky, you know. So even the idea of eating human flesh, and the idea is that God, if God is all experiences, right, and you're attempting to repair God, then you have to engage in all of the experiences, if you will. So
Yeah.
this opens the door up, again, Pandora's box, to the most monstrous things known to man. And another thing regarding an application to military strategy, just looking through my notes here, is that, so you have the Simsum, right, which is the contraction. In Lurianic Kabbalah, Cordoverian or Cordoverian Kabbalah as well. Both are somewhat contemporary. The idea is that God is infinite, pardon, and fills all spaces. So, in order to create the universe, God had to perform Simsum, the contraction. Hence, why the tikkun is the birth pangs, because we're attempting to sort of mimic God here, right? Remember, so it's a deliberate contraction. It's pulling back his infinite light to create a void and an empty space where he, as the sort of quantum observer, could independently experience reality through, right, or exist through. So the idea is, right, this, so I mean, thinking about it now, is that this is exactly what happened with the Exodus. When Rome destroyed the temple in 70 AD, similar to, of course, Nebuchadnezzar II, when he destroyed Jerusalem and sent, of course, the Jews into exile. What we're seeing there is it's almost like a feigned retreat, right? You're feigning retreat, actually not to. It's not a loss; it's a gain, because you're doing it to create almost a deliberate vacuum to draw the enemy into a trap, into ensuring that they feel as though they're now safe. And you're also doing it as a way to push forward relentlessly through an even greater rapidity, because you're nomadic. You don't have a space to call home. you're like God. You're infinite. You're filling all spaces, right? Your foot is
Yeah.
traversing all lands. So this is why you find throughout Jewish history they've managed to survive sudden withdrawals from their land.
Mhm.
And in fact,
Mhm.
they haven't just survived it, they've thrived.
Yes.
Because again, it's you're contracting your force. Thus, you're creating an irresistible vacuum or even a psychological sort of comfort, right? Or a false sense of security. Again, pulling the enemy forward, pulling them into the trap. You're stretching the supply lines. You're also stretching the society itself of the enemy, and you can disrupt them more easily as well through that. So, yeah, I mean, it's everything you see, all of the winning strategies in military history, they have some semblance of Kabbalism in it. I'm not saying they
Yeah.
did it directly or they did it knowingly, but these metaphysics, these metaphysical ideas clearly have some merit to them. So yeah, there's another instance as well. But like what you were saying with Miles Davis and such,
Mm.
that's exactly jazz is a prime example actually, because in jazz you can take things that just really shouldn't go together
Yeah.
and you can make them sound you know um cordial, if you will. You can make them
Yeah.
sound tonally right. So yeah, I mean this is exactly what you're. For example, I'll give you for instance, right? Just really quickly, and I'll have to go, man. But
Yeah.
feminism, third wave feminism, right? Now, the way that modern women dress, right, in terms of the bowl hair, not all modern women, of course, but the sort of woke contingent, the bowl haircut, the fringe that's right up to the top of the forehead, with the septum piercing, looking like some sort of half-arsed bull, and you've got everything else, right? All of the other accoutrements, including the tattoos and everything to, you know, um, basically deter the male gaze, right? From looking upon her comely physique and image, So, but the thing is, she has to look in the mirror and see that. There's no way she can see herself as beautiful. There's no way she can feel confident about herself. There's no way. But, again, in the hybrid warfare of the Ayin and all of this, right? You can make the subject believe that what is discordant is in fact purely harmonious, right?
Yeah.
Just by context, just by liminality, just
Mm.
by, of course, the utilizing these metaphysics. I mean, you've got guys in the UK. I think it was several years back now, maybe 2023. There was this guy called what was his name? Jordan. I forget his second name, but he's supposedly a comedian, right? And he's supposedly not a he, he's a she, right? And he's he's still got the sausage and two veg, but he's got the the breasts or whatever you call them, the man tits or whatever. Anyway, he was created a bit of a ruckus and a bit of a scandal. He was on some sort of quote unquote comedy show on BBC. This is before the watershed, I do believe. And anyway, his mother and father were in the audience, of course, supporting him, supporting their son. And he just gets up from the keyboard after his little, you know, sing song, whatever the hell he was doing. And he just rips off all of his clothes, exposing, again, as I said, the crown jewels and also the scepter, and yeah, the breasts to go along with it, the whatever the hell they are.
I remember this vaguely, yeah.
Yeah, so, and then you had all the eyes behind him. Now, his mother and father were all clapping and cheering, right? Maybe a century ago, they would have been trying to burn him at the stake and exorcise the demon from him, but now they're clapping and cheering. So, what that is you've taken something that is to every single man, woman, and child that is not mentally deranged. They would understand that as a purely, discordant act, right? I'm not just talking about what he did on stage. I'm talking about his mother and father cheering him on and everyone else clapping like a bunch of, idiotic, moronic seals. That itself is a discordant act, but because of the way it's framed, it again they tried really damn hard to do this, but I think it failed. But they tried to, through context, make it seem as though it was, if you will,
Heroic.
normal, heroic. Yeah,
What was
yeah,
he
the
trying to
heroic
like?
people.
What was he trying to prove? Like, here I was a man, but I'm kind of changing over. And is that what he was trying? What was his like?
I'm not sure. It's just that it's like, is there any semblance of reason behind any of these things anymore? I mean,
But he displayed his private parts.
if
Am I right in saying that?
if I had a dick that small, I would not be whapping it out in public. That's all I'm saying.
But
I'd
but
be
was he like? Was
must have
he a
been cold in
proto
there.
trans? Was he a kind of transgender?
No,
Or,
no, he was a transgender. He
I
just kept the
normal
penis and
micro
balls.
penis guy.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's the hormones or something,
Dude,
but
I think he's just trying to get rid off of the oddity since he doesn't really have too much else going for him, obviously.
yeah,
So,
yeah, and
get the attention, get your money, and then he can go and disappear. And so what if everyone knows he's got a micro penis anyways? Any woman he tries to get with.
oh well,
Yeah.
yeah. That could also, I mean, that could also be the hormones, but I mean, the boy is this bloody wee Willy Winky he's got, and got
but
huge
like
bloody man tits. I
the
mean,
thing
why
is,
would you do that?
because like, but he's got breasts. Am I right in saying that? Like he was halfway over the.
Yeah, but they're just breasts because of his eating habits, unhealthy.
Or so he literally just got his knob out for no reason, and
Yeah.
everyone applauded.
Well, no, he actually does have artificial breasts. They're the breast implants, I do believe.
Oh, he did. He got them implanted too.
Yeah. So it's just, it's
So
all kinds
I
of
get it.
weird. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, just
So
call him Aphrodite at this point.
A hermaphrodite, yeah. That's the same. It's the Adam Cadmon. That's
Yeah.
literally what the Adam Cadmon is meant to look like. You've
so
That's
because he was
$6 million,
transgender,
like
they
Judge
just
Dredd.
applauded him.
Sorry, Zeal,
yeah.
go ahead.
Sorry, man. Sorry. Go ahead, Regan.
I was just all the references where it's like RoboCop, Judge Dredd, $6 million Man. Like all of these things are actually hermaphroditic, like Admon, Cadmon, the first Adam of extreme deep Jewish lore.
Yeah.
6 Adams, that came before the 7th, which was at the Adam to Eve, or Eve's Adam. So it's kind of that whole. So like that guy to me, like that's what that is. That's why the media will give them the platform, because they're like, oh yeah, like we'll give you a little bit of money, a little bit of cheese, and come up and like you're promoting our stuff for us. Thanks, man. Like you're kind of like halfway there with the like you almost don't have the organ between your legs and like put in the fake implant tits.
Yeah.
Great, man. Yeah, we'll pay for your surgery. You want to go and talk about it? Sure. Like, they're probably all up in arms about it, like they were probably shocked when he came in and said it, and they had to be like, can you give us a minute? And they go out in the hall and celebrate and like go, all right, we got to play this right, and then decide like how much money do they have to give him to. He's more than willing, so we don't have to pay him that much. Like I can see this all playing out right when I saw his story pop up. that's all I thought of right away was like, oh, here we go with like the androgynous being, this is the way of the future. We'll have everybody souped up in latex bodies. Don't worry, we can just upload your conscience to the digital network. You can get a new body at any time. We don't need
We
the sex
email your.
organ. We got robot pregnancies, right? We got these maidens that walk around with the baby incubators. Have your
Iron
body
Maidens.
all for you. Dystopian wet
Oh
dream
dear,
nut
oh dear.
of the delusionally insane.
What wicked webs we weave.
Well, it's like, you were asking about the whole, like, do they have a grasp on the liminal or such like that?
Yeah.
We all operate the same. So, like, when you know something or you start making that claim, like, I am, I'm a welding engineer. I know welding. Once I make that claim, I'm going to start forgetting everything I know about welding from
Yeah,
that
exactly.
point, right?
Yeah.
Right. Like, if that's why nobody ever wants to claim that, like, they're the master electrician, right? Like, not
Yeah.
really. Just those couple special few that we have on the floor, right? Other than that, like, nobody really wants that title because they know that once they do that, then they're done learning. They don't want to do anything anymore. You're gonna forget everything, and you're not gonna be the master anymore. Like, you're not gonna be king. The king is
Yeah.
actually the forever apprentice. Is the true
Yeah.
king.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have master electricians that are still technically apprentices. They don't take their state license every year because they know that they make more money, they have more power, they have that constant what do you call it? I mean, it's like a constant
Well,
humility
you
that you're putting
you
yourself.
you know what they say, right? That old adage: it's better to be a hungry wolf than to be a transgender comedian with bitch tits.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
that's how the old adage goes.
Jesus
Like
Christ.
that. That's what they were saying hundreds of years ago.
Mother of God.
It's better to be a hungry wolf than an Adam Cadmon with bitch tits
And a micropene.
and a micropene.
A micropene. Not even a micro penis.
No,
No,
you
it's
gotta
so
shorten it
small.
all.
We had to take the
Shorten it
IS
all.
off, man.
Maybe just call it a micro P in his case.
A micro P.
McP. Master McP.
Well, remember what it says
Mother
in
of God.
Midrash Genesis Rabbah 8:1. It states of the first human, Adam Harashon, that, quote, when the Holy One, blessed be he, Yahweh, created the first human, he created him as an androgyne. He created him with two faces, and then he split him and made him two backs, one back for the male and one back for the female. And so there you go. So, do you know what's hilarious? The Christians are all against the whole transgender thing, right? But in
Yeah.
fact,
Ultimate thing.
ultimately, the entire authorship of both Islam and Christianity are all for this. I mean, this is them. It's just I mean, yeah,
Well,
quite
and
literally.
Catholic actually just means like unifying or together, or to bring everything together, to come together. Like that's literally androgyny. The universe unifying, university, it's uni, one. Make all things one thing, which is monopoly, monopoly. So that's,
Monopoly.
yeah. I remember sitting in church as like a kid, man, and like just sitting there like, oh my God, like how hypocritical can you possibly get? Not even realize it. That's the thing, right? Like they're constantly contradicting themselves in every single verse and with every single sermon and with every and going against the whole LGBT stuff, but yet your entire foundations are based on this one man who was androgynous from its start, its origin, the genesis. But it's like covered up in Genesis, obviously. It's not the same in your Catholic Christian books of the Bible and KJV, and even the Geneva and all that stuff was still pretty twisted up. Like all that's not in there, right? And then it's not even in like the main Jewish books. It's not in like the main, modern day Torahs and Tankhs and all that kind of stuff. Like it's in the old archaic scripts of like the Septuagint, right? If I'm saying that right, I always slaughter that one. Or like the if you can get your hands on old scripts of like the Ayurveda and the old Indian scripts and that kind of stuff, like actual first and second century transcriptions of the stuff, which are transcriptions, so they already have that added layer of fallacy to them. Then you change a couple words, right? Call dark light and light dark and stuff like that. I mean, it all gets fucked up. But yeah, it's like even in the Catholic mindset and the fact that Catholic or Catho is to unify or bring together, they still are all about like, think about what the Crusades were. And like basically that's still just going on today at a psychological level, even though it's not physically, people are getting their heads chopped off, they're getting mentally and psychologically chopped off by the head, right? And that it's still the same thing. Like Catholics are still, they're just the nice guy version of Islam. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm going to kill you with kindness if you don't believe in Christ, right? You're going to hell and I'm just trying to save you. Like, it's just the other half of what Islam is.
My favorite one is the rapture, though.
Yeah.
Believe in Jesus Christ, or you won't get raptured up to heaven. And yeah, the rupture, yeah.
Yeah, you want to ascend with the rest of.
Yeah, I know it's. Oh wow, Jesus
But it's
Christ.
still the same thing. It's just the nice guy, good cop, bad cop.
But at least with Islam, right? At least with Islam, it's just straight to the point, right? No pun intended.
Well, I mean, wouldn't you rather have the bad cop who's just actually going to tell you what's going on?
No, because there's something psychopathic with the whole thing with the, especially the evangelical Christians and that, which is, if you don't believe in Jesus, you're going to burn in hell, but I love you. It's like some weird, I don't know, some like weird fucking abuser in a relationship. Like, why are you beating me? Stop beating me. Listen, I'm doing it for your own good. I love you, right? It's like, if you're going to beat me, just say you hate me and then,
right.
beat me and I'll try and defend myself, or, but don't do this psychopathic thing. Yeah, it's confusing. Yeah.
Totally confusing. Where it's, I love you just to death. Well, I'm hitting you. Sorry. It's for your own good.
Listen,
like that's worse. That's worse to me. I'd rather have the guy, if you're gonna beat me, just all right, also say that you like hate me or whatever the reason. Or it'll at least make sense. Hopefully, I can fight back. But
my favorite one is that God is so loving, is so kind, but if you don't say you believe in God, he must also be a narcissist. If you don't say you believe in God, you're not going to get raptured up to heaven and you're going to burn in hell for all eternity. It seems quite proportional, in terms of the crime.
Maybe he's into looks maxing.
Yes, absolutely. I think Jesus and God were like the looks maxers of looks maxing throughout all of time.
God's sitting up there, with the
jawline.
Yeah, he's bone smashing, just sitting there. All these fucking humans, just
on Instagram, uploading like, I just created fucking reality today. Like, what? Beat that and check out my jaw.
Divinagram.
Yeah, Divinagram. Oh my god. Do you think there's other gods like getting jealous of him, like on Facebook? He's kind of other gods of different realities, like looking at him going, fuck.
I think it's like a social media thing. It's like they see how many followers they've got, Like fucking Odin's over at Yahweh, like, what the fuck, man? You stole my fucking followers. I've only got like 10 followers left, man.
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna
Oh,
fucking
dear, oh,
disappear.
dear.
I lose them all. You asshole. You're killing me.
Yeah. Shiva and like a whole load of them on there,
Yeah, Jesus, yeah.
texting
And
each other on WhatsApp.
Should
I
make
know.
one Easter Bunny and Tooth Fairy, and I get them all in on it.
Yeah, Bugs Bunny.
Do you know what's hilarious as well? Think about it as see the social, you know how you hear the social media feed or the news feed. What
Yeah,
do you provide to barn animals? Feed.
yeah.
You know,
Feed, yeah.
they have it in the words themselves. You know, it's another
Slop,
one.
push.
The slop, yeah, yeah.
The
Give 'em
news
the
is the noose. RTE noose. The 6 o'clock noose.
Oh, they got every of the noose now.
Uh,
All 60 minutes.
yeah. Anyway, dudes, I got to check into Planet Abyss of Sleep.
Yeah,
Enjoy
me too, man.
your
Hopefully dream what the lottery numbers are.
Yeah, hopefully if you figure them out, if you're
I'll
feeling
definitely share
generous,
them with you.
we can half them.
I don't know about half now. We'd have to talk about that. But like, I'll be generous.
The
Well, if you
Pareto rule.
out for over here, I got to put in the tickets and everything, and then I'll have to send you the winnings. So just let me know.
Yeah.
Right,
Sound.
dude.
Maybe
Right,
half of
guys.
half of half.
Half of half of half, yeah.
I
Down
don't,
to
I don't
infinity.
care. We'll split it up.
There'll be definitely a few beers in it. Like, put it that way.
Won 3 million quid. Here's the 6-pack. Thank you.
All right, dudes.
Right.
Good night.
Take it easy, guys.
Let's
Bye
hope
bye.
the world is still standing in the morning. Good night.